Right, and start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host, Ben, and this is your Week 31 review show. And leading off, so last week was Title Race Sunday, and it was a very fine Sunday. Last week for me, indeed, the results went all the way, everything went the way I would have wanted. And this past weekend, not so much. And one kind of note I had is I honestly need to do a better job of just kind of living in the moment, enjoy things as they happen, and not necessarily fret about the future. But both in life and maybe in sports, and also in general, I think that sounds a lot more enjoyable because last week all I was thinking about was, well, now Liverpool have to have to keep winning all their games, and I didn't necessarily enjoy like the whole week of being top of the table, and that came back to kind of reality came back to kind of strike back immediately, and so I will get started with the first game with Liverpool and Man United, and it does end 2-2 in kind of just outrageous fashion. It was very similar to that game a couple of weeks ago in the FA Cup when Man United did go on to win that game as well, 4-3 in a bonkers game. Man United, I thought, were a little bit more competitive, at least in that game. Both teams missed chances. In this game, this was one of those kind of like smash and grab kind of kind of games where it was just like a sinking like knot in the stomach where you went into halftime. Liverpool still had the 1 goal lead, but it felt they had left like 2 or 3, maybe in 4 goals, out by not being able to take their chances. And Man United were just all over the place, and you just thought, well, if they get they're one of the best moment teams in the league. They'll play terrible for 90 minutes, but at least Man United do get moments, and they do make those moments count. And that basically did happen, both with Bruno with a well, I there's a mistake by the youngster on the bull Kwanzaa, but it's an unreal hit by Bruno. I don't know how many players would have actually thought to hit that first time because Bruno gets the ball and Van Dijk's still there. There's still a lot to do, and Bruno decides to just take out his chipping wedge from 100 yards out and just clips it over the keeper. Scoring near the halfway line. Just what a goal that was. And then Kobe Mano had a spectacular goal in his own right as well, and it just losing all of a sudden 2-1 in a game that they had fully dominated. So, leading off coming into this, every midweek interview about this game was, whether it was from Van Dijk, McAllister, even Klopp, they all featured the exact same point. Uh, would if you know, w- what would if it, would they repeat what happened in the FA Cup game, essentially, blowing so many wide chances to kill the game off, and that if they'd get their chances, they'd have to take them. Like obviously easier said than done, but at least they knew about it coming into the game, and it still happened. And with Man United, they were coming off that disappointing performance on Thursday. Reports were even saying Eric Ten Hag's job was maybe on the line, where it looked like they had come back from being 2 goals down to actually leading Chelsea 3-2, and then out of nowhere they ended up actually losing that game by giving up 2 goals at the very end in the final like 5 minutes or so, allowing Cole Palmer to get two really late. There was a PK awarded very late, so it's just poor defending. I think it was on Dallo, and then uh, Chelsea were actually had a breakaway in that game very late, and maybe they were unlucky not to even score on that one. So it's very easy to run at this United team. Chelsea were only able to get a corner kick out of that, but they basically scored on the following corner kick. So yeah, there was a lot of following online. Man United fans were not necessarily enthused or optimistic coming into this, but when when their managers are usually on the line, and we're like Ollie Solskjaer was really good at doing this. Usually, they really do turn up, and they have had some success versus Liverpool team. They had this 0-0 draw at Anfield. Liverpool had 30 shots, but it doesn't really matter. And they did win that crazy FA Cup game to knock Liverpool out of the FA Cup. So the lineups did kind of tell a story as well. Instead of Dallo being on the left, which we saw did not really work out, he was back on the right back. Uh, Man United only had one senior center back to play, which was Maguire. So they had to play Cam Kwambala. to make basically his debut or second debut. I think he got a game versus West Ham on Boxing Day, but really haven't seen him that much, and he played well. To be fair to him, and then Maguire did what Maguire basically does. He was good at heading the ball away, but he was a liability anytime Liverpool had the run on. And again, Liverpool should have had more than 2 goals this game. And then Wan-Bissaka played on the left. I guess the idea was to have 1v1s on Salah, but it ended up backfiring because Harvey Elliott was able to drop PK very late for Liverpool to even get something out of the game. And then Casemiro and Meno. No McTominay, which was interesting because I've felt for the while that it doesn't really make sense to play Bruno and McTominay at the same time because it's the same thing. It's the same issues that they had earlier in the season when uh, Ten Hag was playing Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes. You're just leaving, the one holder all by himself. McTominay, can try to play in that holder, and he can do when he's in position. He can do some decent stuff defensively, but he leaves it, and he likes to make runs into the box. And both he and Bruno, you just expose that midfield. You expose that one holder or DM way too often. Here, Casemiro at least gave Mano a little cover, but Casemiro can't run anymore. And again, it was the same kind of issues, to be honest. Bruno was leaving it. Casemiro was able to, he was able for Liverpool to make a run past him, and then to make things even worse is Garnacho and Rashford were not tracking back at all, and so whenever there was kind of a turnover, especially in the middle of the field, Man United would turn the ball in the middle of the field as well, which you don't want to do. Uh, Basically, Liverpool's 2 fullbacks, Robinson and Bradley, were able to make runs, streak all the way up, and then basically because the fullbacks were already, Dalot and Wan-Bissaka were already covering Liverpool's attackers when the fullbacks were making runs, basically Liverpool had 2v1s, and that was the entire first half essentially. And so Garnacho and Rashford were not doing great work defensively, and again, just Man United were just really open and exposed, and just again, Liverpool were not able to punish it. It was one of those we can't defend. So we'll play an open game and see if you can actually if you can score on all these counters. But if you don't, that'll open the game up for us as well. I don't necessarily know if that actually was the idea, but that basically is what it ended up being. And with Liverpool, Bradley, Kwanzaa, Van Dijk, and Robertson, not that surprising. I was a little of me was wondering, could Klopp maybe think about Tsimikas instead of Robinson? Robinson's had some issues defensively when he goes to press. And from whenever he gets into the final third, yeah, his delivery is spectacular. He's basically the assist leader of all time for defenders. Recently passing Trent Alexander-Arnold, funny enough. But anytime he gets near the ball, for some reason his brain or left foot just doesn't it malfunctions essentially, and he's just so many times I've wondered would Samikas be able to do something better, and I still kind of wonder that a little bit. Now the reason why it is kind of worth touching up on this is in the midweek for Sheffield, Klopp did play Joe Gomez left back instead, and Gomez is basically kind of a he's not really a bombing fullback because he doesn't really have a left foot. But what he does is he kind of creeps into midfield. He kind of gives you a different number that way. But it wasn't really working out versus Sheffield. So back to Robinson, and then Kwanzaa played almost out of necessity because Kanate played versus Sheffield and got hurt. Basically, he was lucky that he didn't get seriously hurt because there was a. It might have even been on the goal that they scored. Someone kind of like did a drop kick on his leg, and it was very awkward. Thankfully, it doesn't seem to be too bad, but basically he didn't want to. Klopp didn't want to risk it. So Kwanzaa again, seeing that I wasn't afraid going into it, but now I'm looking at it. Bradley is young. Kwanzaa is 19, maybe 20, and this is really their first time at Old Trafford in this kind of environment. The FA Cup is something different than what this was. Yeah, it was a miserable day as well, rainy, and I don't necessarily know if the stage was too big for him, but it didn't necessarily go well. And then Endo, Szoboszlai, McAllister, probably what you would expect, and then Salah, Nunez, and Diaz. And no Jota fit. You understand that, but that front three is really as poor of a front three that Klopp's had in quite some time. And you would not really think that, looking at the names, but Salah isn't back to where he was before his injury. He's also fasting, uh, Nunez has always kind of been what he is, essentially. I keep wondering, will he finally, take a step forward and kind of change from that? And it seems maybe the answer is no. Now he'll always be someone to create chances. He'll always be someone to give defenders fits. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be someone that's going to have a more of a level head and make better decisions in the box. It's just he brings chaos. Sometimes chaos is helps him out. Sometimes it doesn't. And then Diaz is kind of likewise, where he helps in these open games, in these transition games, but likewise he's not someone that really helps you make great decisions in the box either. And he's never really been a goal scoring attacking player. What he is he goes forward, he takes players on, he's a great dribbler, he can create, but he's not really the person you want to rely on for goals. And I say that knowing that he did get the first goal, and it was very similar to what he scored versus Brighton. And he scored something similar versus Burnley a few last month or so. And he's putting his body on the line, and that is absolutely terrific. But when it comes to when these moments are coming in open play, all three of them are making really bad choices. And it got to a point, honestly, where it seemed every single one, even Salah, was too afraid almost of the moment. They kept blowing chance after chance, and no one really wanted to be the one to actually take the final shot. Unfortunately, a lot of these moments came to Sloboslai, who also didn't seem to have his goal scoring boots as well. And yeah, it was just kind of a nightmarish kind of game where uh, Liverpool almost got in a rut where they were able to just do whatever they wanted to Man United. Then when they got into the penalty area, they didn't know how to actually put the ball in the net. Now, uh, Onana made a couple decent saves. They is worth saying that as well. But I think they had 15 shots to end the first half, and only one or two really on target, if that. So that was quite disappointing. I am wondering why haven't we seen Cody Gakpo play a little bit more on the left? Now, Luis Diaz has some Liverpool fans will say has been the most important player of the last month. I would say McAllister, but some people, or at least most important attacker, I guess I could say. And he has, I think he's like 6 goals for his last 7 or 8 games. Fair enough. But I feel like they're leaving more goals out on the plate. To be honest, like a lot of these games should not be as hard as they've been because the situation in this game is basically the same storyline that we've seen really every single game going back to the turn of January. Man City was the exact same thing where Liverpool were able to turn them over, getting those counter moments, getting those really good 3v3s or even 4v3s or even something even more where you had the number advantage and just not being able to make those breakaways into goals. And it happened again here. So I am wondering why haven't we seen maybe Gakpo tried on the left, Gakpo and Nunez. If nothing else, that'll give defenders. I don't really know how defenders would necessarily be able to handle the physicality of that. And, you're crossing so many balls into the box. You've got physical beasts in there. Gakpo and Nunez is like 6'2". Gakpo is like 6'4" or 6'3". Uh, I'm a little disappointed we haven't necessarily seen that. Now, Gakpo doesn't. I really don't like Gakpo being played in the middle, but I'm kind of disappointed we haven't seen them play tried together. Now, when Jota comes back, obviously Jota immediately comes into that 11 because Jota finishes those chances, and that is something that they have been missing. So that's kind of setting it all up. So getting started, we have Liverpool actually being sloppy to start the game. Garnacho even scores, going around Kelleher, but is offsides. And then the chances come to Liverpool. So the first one is Szoboszlai's shot. Very decent start. So Nunez wins the header. Salah runs onto the loose ball, plays the right pass to Szoboszlai, making a run completely unmarked down the left side, and he gets a decent shot away. It is saved by Onana, sticking a glove out. Maybe if Szoboszlai goes lower, it's harder to save, but it's 3 minutes into the game. You can't really go at him for that. And then Connor Bradley gets an early yellow, so it was just a bit of a nervous start, to be honest. But then Liverpool really did start to kind of take control. So a couple moments here for Nunez, looking to get on goal, but it didn't come off. Uh, Sloppy. He was getting the ball and losing it. Falling down, slipping. It was raining. And then we have another chance for Szoboszlai with another tester. Robertson's cross finds Szoboszlai on the end, but he kind of misses it wide. It looks like he was falling down before he got to that. A chance came from Bruno losing the ball. And that was kind of a moment as well. Bruno wasn't necessarily the best when it came to making decisions, but it doesn't really matter because he's almost like the midfield version of Darwin Núñez, where he creates chaos everywhere he goes too. Sometimes it's a disaster, and sometimes his chaos is absolute brilliance. And I'll get to that later. And then Robinson gets a free run on the ball, awful shot, and but Dallo here is focused on Diaz, and Robinson is just free because Garnacho is not tracking him back, and that was a theme really all half. And then we get to the goal, and it's similar to last week versus Brighton. Nunez wins the first header on a corner kick, and then Diaz is able to get the rebound to go in. The only real moment I have for Man United was they had a chance after a free kick where Bruno tried to pick out Casemiro, and Casemiro kind of heads it across the goal into a danger area, but no one's really there. First real scare, though, and it isn't a reminder that United did still pose a threat, no matter how little of the ball that they had seen in that half. And then I have a couple chances to end the half. So one is a Salah's shot saved over the bar, or it's saved. So Mano loses the ball. The break is on. It's really easy for Liverpool to break with numbers. The ball gets to Luis Diaz. He has Salah streaking on his right. Diaz plays him the pass, but it's slightly too close to him. And Salah still tries to hit it first time. He forces a save, but again, if Diaz did make it a little more awkward than it needed to be by not giving Salah a better pass to play in front of him. And then we have a Salah shot that goes over the bar. And first Van Dijk picks out Luis Diaz, who one times the ball back to Robinson, who sprints upfield into the open space because Diaz has again dragged Dallo out of possession. Robinson's cross finds Szoboszlai in the box. He has options, and he chooses to play it to Salah, but Salah just slashes the ball, hitting it way over the net, and slashing at the ball, making poor decisions, having poor crosses, poor passes in the box. It was all happening again, and I was melting down at halftime. They were leading, but did not feel comfortable at all. And I had a knot in my stomach at halftime, to be honest, and just fearing those blown chances were going to show up in the second half at some point because that it had in the games that they've dropped points or lost. It hasn't been that many. Or in the games that it looked like it should have been a comfortable win, and it was actually stomach turning, were because of this. Even Brighton last week was the exact same scenario, and then with Man United, they were so bad it couldn't get worse. They couldn't keep the ball, couldn't string together any serious attacks, turnover after turnover, where Liverpool had the break after break, and Liverpool were creating these 2v1s on the sides the entire half. It was quite stunning that Man and I were not able to address that at all. And then the second half starts with a similar screw up, so no changes in the lineup for either team. And you did wonder, would it be a repeat of the first half? And we get the answer immediately following, and the answer was no. So here we get the Bruno goal, and outside of maybe like an injury, that's like the worst thing that could have happened for Liverpool's sake, because it's a poor mistake by a young player trying to grow in confidence, having a moment that could stick with him throughout his career. We'll have to see if this is another similar famed Gerrard slip moment. You don't want that to be the case. I'm gonna make the argument later on that it's not. If Liverpool make these moments happen that they got in the first half count, it's 3-1 at this point, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really show up. But because they didn't, it's only a one goal game. This really did change it completely. And the reason why to say that is it almost felt like Liverpool lost composure after this. They started rushing things. They started uh, uh, again like the stage all of a sudden got to them a little bit. So here Liverpool are just kicking around. There's really no pressure. Man United aren't even like pressing. Kwanzaa has Van Dijk all alone, wide open, and he just plays the ball in front of it. It's almost like a blind pass. Kwanzaa could also go to Kelleher, and it's not really like someone is pressing Kwanzaa. It's just I think what happens is his left foot is maybe weak, and what he does is he turns. I guess it was token pressure. I guess it was someone kind of near him, and he turns to get away from him, and he's got Van Dijk, but he plays it with his left foot, and maybe he just mishits it, to be honest. But the pass basically finds Bruno, and fair play for Bruno to just take the shot because if not, Bruno has to still beat Van Dijk, and I don't think that's going to happen. It's not like there's Rashford or it's not like there's Højlund anywhere near to offer support. Bruno has to do this all alone, and so he instead just decides to again ship Kelleher from a good I don't know 45, 50 yards out essentially, and he's able to knuckle it past. I mean, what a goal, to be honest. And I mean, there you go. The game that should have been out of sight Even before this, it's not. It's 1-1, and I think it rattled everyone. And then the chances started to come to Man United. So Garnacho's shot nearly deflects and causes problems, and then Rashford had a cross that everyone kind of left, and it bounced in front of Kelleher. That could have been and then Bruno times around onside and on a cross that finds him and nearly gets a touch on a flick. He misses the ball. If he just touches this just a little bit, it probably goes past Kelleher. And then the big chance before the Mano goal, Liverpool blow another 5v2. And this one, I have in my notes, made me dead inside. So they do well to win the ball off Garnacho and break, and Szoboszlai carries the ball 40 yards to find Salah, who plays in Diaz on the right. Diaz then finds Nunez, and he has Szoboszlai for the easiest cutback ball in his life for Szoboszlai to basically have a tap in. And Nunez instead goes for goal or tries to square the ball across the goal and just blows the chance entirely. Nothing comes from this. Uh, Before, Salah could have tried to take it on. Diaz could have tried to take it on, and everything just seemed when Liverpool got into the box, it was almost like, I don't wanna be the one to blow this. And it felt like that. No one seemed sure of themselves. And, they had this exact situation in the FA Cup game versus Man City, back in December versus Arsenal. And it's almost like when they get in these ruts where they're getting all these shots, but nothing's actually, leading to goals or leading to saves. Uh, when they have almost situations where it should be almost a sure goal, and because they have so much of a numbers advantage. It's almost like that hurts them. It's almost like this would have been better if it was just a 3v2 than the five. It's almost like the extra number, made it more complicated because there were more options to pass to be honest. And then, there was a moment there, and then it didn't, and it showed up even worse because a couple minutes later, Mano scores an unbelievable goal. So insult to injury, Man United scores shortly following this. Casemiro has an overhead kick just to kind of boot this away. Uh, Casemiro did not have a good game, but he played a role in the goal here. And then he finds Mano. Mano actually dribbles it upfield. So really the goal starts with Mano, so it's fitting he scores it. And then the ball finds Garnacho, who since moved to the left side. Rashford wasn't really having a good game. He was subbed off. Maybe he was dealing with an injury. They brought on Anthony on and then moved Garnacho back onto the left. And when he did that, Garnacho actually looked a little bit more influential. And then Wan-Bissaka finally, had a little moment, going forward, and he picked out Mano in the box. And then credit to the kid, he creates a little space with a touch, and he goes for the curler. He when he touches it, he means to do it. It's almost similar to what happened yesterday with Gvardiol. Gvardiol had to do it because his touch wasn't necessarily that good, but it is kind of similar, and he just nails it with a wonderful goal to get it past Keller. I can't really go with that. I don't think Allison would have saved that either. It's just unlucky. And then Liverpool had to make some changes. So Nunez off. He was not having a good game. I even said good riddance, and it's patience really is over. Where if you're not your leading striker has to do more to carry you to a title. To be honest, we're starting to see Havertz actually do that for Arsenal, and just Nunes is creating chaos. And if Jota is playing with them, it would be fine because they would still be leading to goals. So you'd still need someone to finish those chances, and Nunes isn't doing it right now. Endo off. Endo wasn't playing poor, but they needed to bring on someone with more legs. So the Klopp changes were different because in some cases they worked in midfield, but I don't necessarily they worked in attack. So what he did was he moved Alexis back to the number 6. He brought on Curtis and Elliott, and then Gakpo came on. He also took off Bradley to move Gomez to right back, and Gomez probably could have started. He's a little more experienced. Bradley didn't necessarily have a bad game, but there was also a moment in the first half where he's on the ball maybe 8 yards from goal, and he tries to side foot it instead of putting his laces through it. So, but then again, Gomez has never really scored either. But Gomez came on and played well. To be fair to him, and Curtis Jones and Elliott came on, and they both. It seemed like Liverpool's midfield was working a little bit better. Szoboszlai picked like the worst time to have his most influential game, but also for poor reasons essentially. And Curtis was a little bit better at pressing, getting some turnovers, but also advancing ball, making some better decisions. Now he isn't really a goal threat himself, which is unfortunate, so that didn't necessarily help out. But Elliott is, and Elliott likewise, inserted a little more energy in that midfield. It seemed like he was just better and quicker at getting to Man United and getting some turnovers, and Liverpool took back control of the game after this point. And then the only issue was Gakpo coming on for Nunez, and when Gakpo plays in the middle, you don't really remember Gakpo even having any kind of a outlet or any kind of a moment into the game. He didn't really influence it at all since coming on. And a note I had here is until Jota gets back, and it looks like he's back training again, thankfully. I wish Klopp would trust Danz a little bit more. He's trust a bunch of these kids to play for him. Now, Old Trafford, that kind of setting isn't necessarily the best one to throw the kid out there, but I do wish we could see a little bit of him more. He was available on the bench. We haven't really seen him since the Southampton game. And then we have a chance for Luis Diaz, Radit Onana, and then Salah fails. So decent Gomez cross finds Diaz, but he flops on the shot. But at least he forces Onana to kind of make a save. It was raining. It was hard for the keepers to catch it. But again, this is a situation where Jota probably buries this. And then after the shot is saved, Onana, because Onana spills it, Salah is right there, and he acts like a 5-year-old learning to kick a ball with his right foot for the first time. The one criticism I do have of Salah is this. This is so frustrating. Uh, and it's frustrating, too, because it's not that different from the goal or circumstance he scored in the FA Cup game when he scored that with his right foot right before halftime. And the goal is right there, and he just kind of slices it out of bounds, and then he does score with the PK, but he did not necessarily have his best game. And I didn't think Liverpool really deserved this, but they do get bailed out in the end. It probably doesn't really matter. The draw technically does keep them in it. Kwanzaa, at least, I want to have this note. Kwanzaa does well here. And he's a big reason why they at least get something in the game. So, hard mistake earlier, but at least helped to rectify it a little bit. So here he keeps the ball from going out of bounds, really makes a nice run, and then he backs heels it to Elliott, so keeping the ball. And then Elliott's able to find Salah, and then Salah immediately plays it to Elliott back in the box, and then Wan-Bissaka decides to go to ground, and the ref gives it. Now, there isn't really contact, but because he goes to the ground, it's almost like Elliott has to get out of the way, so he's still influencing the play. Maybe in the past years it wouldn't have been given, but when you go to ground like that, you're putting it in the ref's hands essentially, and I can't necessarily say if it's a massive error or not. I feel like that's the way VAR kind of looks at it. Uh, I'm going to get to the Arsenal game. I didn't really think they deserved a PK in their game either. So it is what it is. Liverpool got a little break, and Arsenal got a break versus Brighton. But and then Salah scored the PK, and and then I think right before that there was a moment for Gomez to maybe even win the game. This would have been quite the story as well because everyone knows he hasn't really scored or ever scored for a Liverpool shirt. And it basically he gets a good shot off and it deflects off Maguire and it nearly wrong foots Onana. It was one of those moments when he was able to get into the box and he had a decent strike on it, but it just the deflection kind of took a little bit off it. If Onana had dived, or maybe if there was a little more on the deflection, maybe it could have gone in. And then there was a moment for Diaz to win the game. Robinson gets away with maybe a baby shove, but he's not called for it. Diaz is closest to the ball in the box. It's not the easiest chance. I'm not really going to go with him. I'm not going to say Jota would have buried this. I'm going to go with Diaz for the missed chances before this. But it was a moment. He just couldn't keep the effort down. It was a hard chance. I can't really go with him for that. And then Diaz was able to create a chance as well because he made a late run and was able to draw a free kick. Liverpool had a nice free kick into the box, and there was a rebound. LA got on the rebound and just hit it right at Onana. If he hits it anywhere else, this probably goes in. So it was just nearly moments, and it was just one of those days. But the reason why I'm a little melting down a touch is they've had one of these days every single game week for since going back to December now, and the only thing I can think about is the one kind of finisher on the squad that you can rely on, the one player that seems to understand how to make the right play, how to strike the ball properly to at least put it on net, is Jota. And since they've been missing him, man, have they been missing a lot of chances. I mean, they create so many every single game week now. Man United allow teams to get 25 shots in you no matter what. They did that to Brentford. I think they got 31. But Liverpool have been doing this basically every single game week. They did it to Newcastle. They did it to recently. They did it to they did it to Man City. I think they had 20. Did it to Brighton. Did it here. And yeah, it is unfortunate because the Kwanzaa moment does kind of overshadow a little bit more of what happened before that, and I think they just. I mean, full take is, or the first time, full time, yeah, first take is the head loss. To me, was really bad because I got to a point I didn't want them to draw. I just like you lose in the misery where it would be. A note I had was it would feel better to just kind of lose the title now and just kind of enjoy the rest of the season than experience what happened in 22 again, because losing it on the final day. Losing in the second half to Man City, who were losing 2-0 to Villa, only to lose by like a point or two, was excruciating. And of all the games to do it, it's Man United. And the reason why it happened in 22 is Liverpool had the title in their hands, and they had a home game. A couple of it was like 3 or 4 games before the end of the season, but they had a home game for Spurs, and almost the same thing had happened. They had 25 shots to Spurs having like 3, and the game ended 1-1. And it was that was at Anfield, but and they basically lost the title because of that. So you don't want to necessarily say it'll be the repeat here. There's still 7 games. There's still a lot of ways for this kind of turn. Arsenal and City have Champions League. Saka looks like he's limping every single game he plays. Rice has to play every single game week. So Libre and Gabriel have to play every single game week. Is that going to maybe factor in a little bit? But now Liverpool do not control their fate. They're losing to Arsenal by like 9 on goal differential, but they are tied on points, and then I think Man City are just 1 off. So going to have to basically win out to at least give this a shot. Now they can do that, but I'm not necessarily. This is one of those where they needed to win because there are a lot of roadblocks. There are like three away games that are going to be really annoying. There's one at Everton, which I can imagine that being hell. I think that's in the midweek too, which is kind of awkward. And then Fulham and West Ham, and I think they play West Ham early. It's like the early Saturday game, a couple of weeks from now, and that could be quite annoying too. So I'm a little nervous because maybe you had I didn't necessarily think Liverpool had to win out all the way through, but I did feel like they only had one roadblock or one place to have a speed bump, and maybe it'll just be this one, but we'll have to see. But I was melting down. I just Gakpo when he came on didn't really offer anything through the middle. Szoboszlai picked a terrible time. Another thing too was Robinson was making me curse every time he had a corner kick because he kept missing the defender. Uh, 7 big chances, 5 missed for Liverpool, 28 shots, 7 on target. Man United did have 9 shots, 5 on target, point 0.7 XG for Man United, 3.6 for Liverpool. Man United with 270 passes, 77% accuracy. Liverpool with 486, 85, so a little lower. Given how it was almost like because Man United was so poor on the ball, Liverpool were able to just go direct and actually, that's why they had so many shots. But maybe the better course of action would have just kind of been to kill the game a little bit, have a little bit more control, a bit like what Man City did to Man United a couple of weeks ago. But because you allow Man United to just kind of sit in. Maybe you get their legs to tire in, and maybe a shot would have been able to deflect to go in instead of all these, trying to get all these transition opportunities because all you really did was you kind of tired your legs out. But that said, 15 shots in the first half. I can't necessarily go at Klopp because that should have he coached what should have been a little bit better. And it's not the first time. Versus Real Madrid in the Champions League final. It was something similar. They always get out in out of the speed blocks. They always sprint out and really big in these games, and it's just a question of can you get those moments to go in or not? Because if you do, you win the game. Out of the blocks. If not, all you're doing is you're tying your legs out. So unfortunately, but sticking on with Liverpool. My buddy Alex is a Man United fan, and he was kind of texting Liverpool are going to win this 9-0 because Friday news came out. They had some more injuries to their back line, and I actually, a true story, I responded that I'm never going to underestimate this team's ability to create 40 attempts a game and to blow nearly every single one. And basically, I said I can see a 2-1 scrappy win because of those missed efforts, and I wasn't that far off. But it was deflating. Deflating as a fan. Just I wonder how the squad will react, but. And it did feel similar to that Spurs result a few years ago, but uh, I mean, to do It is weird too because I always felt like the blown chances were going to catch up, but it didn't. I wouldn't have guessed this one. Like Kwanzaa having the mistake, it was just one of those games. Bruno, turning into Wayne Rooney from the halfway line, or Kobe Mano channeling his Cristiano Ronaldo from distance. So it was a game of transitions, and in a weird way, maybe it played in United's hands because we'll give you the ball, see if you can attack, and if you can't, then we'll be able to attack with the game being so open. Uh, but Liverpool would just win the ball back immediately, and it was just time after time. And the only thing I want to say is Jota can't be the only attacker that can finish chances. So there's got to be a bigger issue here, whether or not it's a Klopp thing where they just straight up do not practice finishing moments in training. They work on goal kicks, they work on pressing. I don't know if that's the case, but this has been an issue for a while now. Uh, Jota can't be the only attacker. I don't know if they need to rectify that in the transfer market or not. One thing I was thinking about as well is they brought in Ryan Gravenberch very late in the transfer window, and it's looking more and more like that was a mistake. You don't want to necessarily go with the kid because he has a lot of potential. He's only 20, 21 years old, but by bringing him in, you kind of stunted Curtis Jones or Harvey Elliott's development, where they could have seen a little bit more, or Bobby Clark. And what you did is you spent 40 million for this player from Ajax, who they had always seen him as basically a Jude Bellingham alternative, and it doesn't seem like that is the case. But by doing that, but by paying what you paid for him, which was like 40 million, West Ham got Mohamed Kudus, for about the same fee. And Klopp would have known about him because Kudus scored a banger of a goal for Ajax in the Champions League a couple of last year, or I guess two seasons ago. So Liverpool had to have known about him, had to have known he was available. And there was all this talks before he went to West Ham that Brighton were looking at him, maybe Chelsea was looking at him. So it's not necessarily like Champions League would have been a reason for him to not pick Liverpool. So that was a mistake. That was a mistake in recruiting because had you brought in Kudus, I think the title would have been won. So just unfortunate. And again, I do want to reiterate the point that Kwanzaa's mistake shouldn't have mattered. So people are going to go at Kwanzaa. I'm gonna say that Gomez probably should have started at right back. I mean, I don't really go at Bradley, but when Gomez came on, I did feel like he played a little bit better. I think Zamika should start for Robertson. Better delivery, in my opinion, at this point. Robertson's probably a better defender when he's in position, but he's usually not in position. He's kind of pressing like mad to try to get some turnovers. And sometimes you can miss and play around him. Uh, obviously it prevents Robertson from taking corner kicks as well because that fries me up more than anything else now. Uh, and I'm kind of disappointed we haven't seen more Tsimikas because he was a big reason why Liverpool got something versus Nottingham Forest, a month ago. Kwanzaa having the injury scare is the reason why. I mean, Konate having the injury scare is the reason why Kwanzaa had to play. So that was maybe Kwanzaa could have played for Sheffield, and you could have had Konate for Man United. But Salah gets a little break because he's recovering from injury and fasting. Only to an extent, though. It's the title run now. He's got to work on finishing with his right foot. Do that in training this week. That can't be a cudgel any longer. He's blowing open net chances. And Nunes, Gakpo, and Diaz doesn't seem to work. And Diaz did score, but the amount of times he's been in these situations all month, I don't feel like it can be excused anymore. And I don't really like the Diaz Nunes Salah front three. Something else needs to maybe Elliott. I don't know, not Elliott over Salah. Maybe Salah through the middle. I don't really know how you would do it. Gakpo was a left winger at PSV, and he scored versus United just this time last season, playing on the left side. It's disappointing he hasn't been given more of a shot. There you can go at a lot of things with Gakpo, but one thing you can't is he's got a terrific finish and also a terrific cross on him. And it's weird. We've never really been able to see it. Uh, Gakpo also maybe came in with a little confidence because he did score a late winner or a late goal versus Sheffield. It was a header, but still, it's been a very weird signing. He hasn't necessarily. There's never been a place for him to necessarily fit. But you can say the same thing with Diaz. Liverpool play with these. It's a 4-3-3, and you have your attackers playing, or you have your wide players playing wide. But the way Klopp uses his fullbacks usually It's not always the case, and Diaz has never really fit in that well, to be honest, because he was a wide player at Porto, I believe. He's a fantastic dribbler, but he seems to be a little more on the touchline. He's never really been what they call an inside forward like Mane was, and Diaz was supposed to replace Mane, and turns out Jota is actually the player that replaced Mane, and the only issue is Jota is not always available fitness wise. And in this situation, it's not necessarily like he was brittle or anything like Christian Norgard or someone at Brentford fell on his knee and like shattered his knee. But that is just really really unfortunate. Now, one thing you can say is you have the run in and Trent Alexander-Arnold, Jota need to return. Kanate close to returning, and it looks like they are. I think I even saw Stefan Bacic is back in training. So Klopp and I think Allison is close to returning, and Allison's the number one. I can't really say Keller has been the reason why they've dropped points, but getting Allison back is probably going to be a lift as well. But definitely Jota, you need to have him back. So we'll see. I mean, the title now is in Arsenal's hands in theory, but we'll have to see what they do. Still potential for them for this to turn over. They still have some roadblocks with Chelsea. I think they still have United as well, and they still have Spurs. And I don't think Spurs are going to lose all three games to the title contending three. So basically, Spurs will decide who basically does lift the title. So we'll have to see if Liverpool can make it to the Spurs game where the Spurs game matters. Otherwise, if they drop points, if they get another draw, a scrappy draw versus West Ham or an Everton or Fulham coming up, it's probably not going to matter. So we'll have to see. Um, and then the Champions League could bring us a storyline as well. I mean, Liverpool will have to deal with Europa, traveling on Thursday nights. Uh, but it does feel like Liverpool have a decent enough squad to at least maybe handle some of that. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how Klopp rotates the squad a little bit. But one thing to kind of end off is on the optimistic side. They weren't supposed to win this year, and to say they've overachieved is a massive understatement. The midfield rebuild, no one knew how that would go. Alexis has been spectacular, uh, even better than I was expecting. Endo been a pleasant surprise as well. Slobosly hasn't been as good as I would have hoped for, but he's not. He's worlds above Henderson, Keita, and Milner. Injuries are sustained to big time players. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Salah out for 2 months. Jota, Robertson, Tsimikas both had to miss some time. Allison's missed 2 months. Curtis Jones was out for a little bit. They haven't had Matip the whole year. So you've had to force youngsters like Kwanzaa and Bradley into the side to get serious minutes, and you didn't really know how they would react, and they've reacted spectacularly uh, to a point where you have the idea if they could in the future. Maybe you even have them as future starters, not just squad players. And you really didn't know about these players even before that. So that's been a bit of a surprise and boost as well. And again, the goal was to just get back into Champions League. The way that they finished last season, where they weren't really competitive, uh, to all of a sudden, be back into the title race, title charge, to win a cup final. All of this feels extra. Uh, and the only reason why I think I'm a little melting down is knowing with the idea knowing that it's going to be the last season with Klopp. If Klopp hadn't announced that, I don't think I would really care. I'd be like, "Look, they'll be able to roll again next year." Uh, but Klopp leaving, one you want it to, you don't want it to end bittersweet, where it's like this what ifs because that's what 22 was like. But the other thing too is you don't really know what next season or the future will bring. Now it looks like they are all the links to Ruben Amorim of Sporting do seem to just only get stronger and stronger. So, but he plays a different style of football, at least a different formation. It seems like the philosophy is about the same, but you never really know how that'll work. You don't really know if that'll if personalities will clash or not. You don't know if Liverpool's main stars will decide to leave because the draw to Liverpool was Jurgen Klopp. It wasn't necessarily Anfield, the city itself. So there's still a lot of ways for this to change, and but it's also still a lot of season left. So we'll have to see. Uh, but another thing too is eh, not only are they moving on from Klopp, they've brought in Michael Edwards back, and it's been a rough week for the sporting director that was in charge after Michael Edwards left. Gravenberch, Gakpo, and Nunez don't necessarily seem to fit the style of the team. Edwards' main thing was picking people that were uh, underperforming their expected goals, not necessarily overperforming. Nunez basically overperformed at Benfica by a lot, and we're kind of seeing that a little bit. And I want to like Nunez, but it just feels he is what it is, and it's hard to win a title being that inconsistent with that nine being your attack. And another thing too is Liverpool with Mane, Salah, and Firmino were the best front three in the world in these situations, in these transition situations. And I guess I was just really spoiled because I keep expecting better when they get in those breakaway situations, and it's just been a theme all calendar year that they haven't been able to do it. And then with Man United, just so poor in the first half. And then they got the lead. And what's funny enough is after they got the lead, after they got the Mano goal, they sat back and made it, sat in the block. And if not for Wan-Bissaka losing his head, I think they win the game. I think it almost worked out in their favor when they started sitting back, and it wasn't such an open game. And I'm trying not to be a sore loser, but I thought Ten Hag made a howler. He got it right not selecting McTominay, fair enough. Maybe he got it right playing Wan-Bissaka on the left until the PK. Dallo back on the right because he was so poor versus Chelsea. But I think he punished Anthony for the PK versus Chelsea late on Thursday, and I thought Anthony actually did pretty well versus Liverpool in the FA Cup game. And the reason was he was basically like a left back when he came on. He you can go at Anthony for a lot of things, but he's somewhat decent at tracking runners back. Garnacho was not doing that at all. Garnacho was a passenger, and he almost seemed uncomfortable until he was moved over to the left after Rashford went off. So, weirdly enough, I think it was a mistake not to play Anthony to start, and I never would have thought about saying that. Casemiro can't run, and he struggled all game, but I don't really know who you could play next to Kobe Mano. Uh, Maybe Amrabat, but that people don't really like him. And just Rashford and Garnacho were just leaving their fullback out to dry the whole game. It was surprising they didn't change course, and Ten Hag had to play Harry Maguire, but he didn't change how they played to suit him until they actually started sitting in a deep block. So it was not organized at all. It didn't seem like they were pressing. I didn't really see what was necessarily the goal, but some positives was Kobe Mano, obviously, not just the goal. He was quite good as well. And then the Cam Guala a debut where they needed someone to at least play back there, and he didn't do a terrible job. It got to a point where Liverpool were able to just get looks at their goal, but it's not necessarily like he was beaten 1v1. It's not like he took anyone down for a PK. It seemed he was stepping in front of the ball. He was winning some headers. So yeah, fair play to the kid. And then yeah, it's just I've gone at Man United over and over again. I mentioned the slinky concept. I don't necessarily need to do that again, but you can't win a game if you're going to be that sloppy, turning the ball in the middle of the field as well. It doesn't really matter what kind of tactics you try to do. You can't do that, especially if you're not going to track runners either. This was either in midfield or the attackers. It was really easy to run past Mano and Casemiro because one, they have a lot of defending of the pitch to do for just two players, and two, I mean Casemiro is just easy to run past anyway. So Mano had to just kind of hold down the fort all by himself. He wasn't really able to do it. I thought Rashford and Hoyland were bystanders. I don't really understand why Man United never tried to get Hoyland involved. That's been a very weird story. Now he's come back from injury. Before he had that injury, he was scoring for them every single game, and he's gone a couple games now, returning, and he doesn't even get looks. He doesn't get touches. So that's been a bit surprising. But one thing I can say is, should Ten Hag be bounced out because that's been a topic coming into this. I do think the injuries to the back line have definitely hampered them, but it's also why are they not adjusting how they play with those injuries? And again, they finally figured it out after the Mano goal where they were sitting deep. But Maguire doesn't have any pace, and he can win some headers in the box. And United do have some pace on the wings. You've got Bruno with the ability to pick out those runs ahead with those long balls. You can play on the counter more, and I think it suits them more. Because it's not just Liverpool. Chelsea had 25 shots on them. Brentford had 31 shots just in the last week. So what they've been doing has not been good. And uh, if someone that wants to defend Ten Hag a little bit, they've got to improve on that at least. Find a way to find a way to at least, somewhat be, uh, somewhat be, I don't want to say competitive, but, change, find a way to change a way of a playing style that fits the team that you have. That's what a good manager is, not someone that has to rely on certain players. Um, but another thing too is if they do decide to get rid of him, you have to think about this. There's the FA, there's the Copa America, and there's Europa. So you're not going to get anyone. In whether or not you're going to try to ship people out of the squad. I think you've got to lose like 10 players. When I was going through. Uh, you're gonna have to do a lot of squad turnover, and you're gonna bring a new coach on top of that. So, maybe they wanna just start all over. They do have, new people coming in with Ineos, but at the same time, new players coming in, a manager coming in, and not gonna have anyone to really do any kind of training until August, and the season starts, well, it's, a couple weeks after that. You're gonna have a poor season to start next season anyways. So I would suggest, kind of eat the bullet and just kind of, go into next season with somewhat stability, and if things aren't working out, then maybe make a change in January. But I don't know. I don't know what they'll end up doing, but it's not necessarily going well, and that is unfortunate because another thing too is he came into this, which a lot of people agreed was not the best situation, and all he did was win a title. Now Carabao Cup, but it is what it is. Trophy is a trophy. Uh, it had been a while since Man United had won one of those, and got them in the Champions League. So I mean, what more do you want for your first year? So and they've had injury after injury. It's been really hard for anyone to be as competitive as they've been. And lo and behold, they're not terribly. It had a couple of results gone differently. Had they beaten Brentford, had they won this game, had they maybe beaten Chelsea, they would not have been that far away from West Ham, which is in a Europe spot. Now they're not going to be getting the Champions League, but at least they were close in that respect, and they can maybe still have an outside shot. So and I think that would be good, especially if you're gonna have a new season, new team next year. I think that would help them, to be honest. But I don't know. Moving on to then Arsenal and Brighton, and I did go long on Liverpool and United. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the game, but one thing I am going to spend time on is what Brighton did to Arsenal, and I think other teams can maybe copy it. So we'll have to see. But it starts off with Saka getting a PK. I thought the call was lame, but it is what it is because I think it's Gabriel Jesus gets the ball and then he does well to do a little move and he gets Lamptey to kind of bite. Lamptey gets the ball, but he does stick the leg out and does basically clatter into to Jesus. There is a lot of contact, but he does just chip the ball a little bit, but that hasn't been the case this year. They don't care if you get the ball; it's the follow through that counts and the force that counts. And then Havertz and this was basically all Brighton's doing as well. Now they had done such a good job to this point of playing through Arsenal, kind of pressing them, and here, they win the ball back, and then Enciso kind of plays a poor pass that Jorginho is able to intercept, and then I think it's Ben White. Ben White finds Odegaard, and then Odegaard is just brilliant to shift a little over, and he sees Jorginho has continued his run, and it's gone unmarked, and Odegaard plays Jorginho, and then Jorginho does something that I wouldn't even expect. He's quite clever on the touchline or on the byline. Instead of sending a ball first time where Havertz isn't necessarily in position yet, he takes another touch. And then after doing that, or another dribble essentially. And then after doing that, Havertz is there, and then it's easy for a square ball. So clever doing by Havertz and Jorginho, the Chelsea contingency. And then Trossard's able to celebrate versus former side at the very end, where Brighton had to push numbers up. Game was already over at this point. It is a good finish by Trossard, and it is worth noting that Trossard had this opportunity versus Man City and decided to slow down. And this time he actually showed the afterburners. He continued his sprint and was able to finish by doing that. So it didn't feel like a 3-0 game, to be honest. And Brighton. What's funny enough with Brighton is they were actually doing quite well to play through Arsenal, and they were getting into good moments, and it would be Tyreek Lamptey or it would be a Dingra or Carlos Beba, and they'd be able to have the run on Arsenal, and it was just were they able to make those moments count? Were they able to find attackers in positive positions, and they weren't. But as we saw yesterday, Bayern were, and it was very, very similar. So that's something I'll get to a little bit. But or before this, Arsenal had to beat Luton, and they were able to win 2-0 comfortably. They really shuffled lineup in that game, and they were quite good. Smith Rowe played and was quite good as well. And then so Ben White and Trossard returned to the Amex. That was another storyline coming into this as well. Ben White had a good game. And Trossard scores. Trossard didn't start, but he came on and scored. And then with Brighton beat Arsenal last time, basically a year ago. But they had Caicedo, Alexis, and healthy Evan Ferguson and Levy Colwell that game. This one they didn't, and that's basically been a story for Brighton as well. De Zerbi is getting stick now. Fans don't necessarily rate him. Apparently, he's been linked to some jobs, and fans don't really want him. He keeps being linked to the Bayern job, which is interesting, especially because if he's able to go to that kind of environment, you maybe be able to see him do something in the Champions League. But uh, the thing with Brighton this year is they haven't had the players. It's the injuries is one thing, but just they haven't been able to replace what they lost. And here, Lamptey, Van Hecke, Dunk, Estupiñán. Van Hecke and Dunk isn't necessarily the best defensive back line. Belda looks like he's going to be a player next year or for the future. But being played next to Mulder or Gross. Gross is a good player, but he just what I would have liked in this game would have been maybe Beba and Gross together, and then instead of a Mulder, maybe João Pedro, to play with Danny Welbeck, because that was another thing too. Welbeck was kind of isolated. And he was dropping for the ball and being an outlet for the ball, but when they turn, they wouldn't really have an outlet to go forward. You'd have a Dingra, you'd have Lamptey, but Lamptey wasn't able to go the full game. Enciso doesn't look like he's recovered from injury. He's able to play, but he doesn't look nearly the same kind of pacey player that was before injury. It looks like that could take some time for him to get back his fitness. You hope that is the case. It's just a matter of time and recovery. Otherwise, that would be unfortunate if he's not going to be the same player that he was pre ACL. But he kind of struggled a little bit as well. But you look at that. No Matoma, no Sully Marsh, no pace on the side anymore. Yao Pedro was on the pitch. Evan Ferguson was really good at dropping back and kind of doing wall passes and basically being able to have people run off Evan Ferguson last year, and they haven't been able to play him all season as well. So that's just kind of where Brighton are, and then with Arsenal, not many changes. Zinchenko was in for I think Kilwar, Jorginho back, Odegaard, Rice, Saka, Havertz, and Jesus. So Martinelli still on the bench. Trossard fit, but only for the bench, and it worked out because Jesus was able to get the PK, but Jesus also had a number of moments in the first half to actually score, and he didn't. Similar to what he did with Man City, and I'm surprised we aren't seeing Trossard actually starting. If Martinelli's not able to go, I think Trossard is your better option on the left because similar to Jota, in my opinion, what he does is he scores. He makes good decisions when he gets into the final third. Uh, but this was not the most clean game for Arsenal, and we'll get to maybe why. But they did start off well. So early Arsenal scare. I think there's a free header for Gabriel on a missed free kick, and then there's an Enciso chance. Brilliant play. Build up. It looked like the Brighton were targeting Zinchenko's side because that was another thing too. It was interesting to see Zinchenko was played over not just Kilwar but over Tomiyasu. And it looked like Brighton were trying to target that side, and we're having some success, to be honest. And then there was a big chance for Saka where he missed it wide, and then Jesus had a shot saved by Verbreggen, and then he had a header that missed wide. Nice little pick up by Havertz, but it took too long to maybe get the ball out of his feet. And then the thing was 1v1 with Zinchenko and missed wide. And then we have basically the goal, and it comes from a PK. I didn't like the call, but people have spoken about it online. They said it's a good call. Former refs have spoken out. They said it's a good call as well. But it did feel like a gift to Arsenal. It did feel like the game was still in the balance. I mean, just even at 1-1 at half or 1-0 at halftime. The thoughts I had was Brighton is still Brighton at the back. They still good at being a possession based side that can play through a team, trying to high press, trying to turn the ball over. And the only issue is because they were actually, everyone has been praising Arsenal with their vaunted high press, the box four kind of setup. I thought they were breaking through it with these. I thought Carlos Beba was doing really well to get on the ball, turn upfield, and run past Jorginho. It was one of the situations where them playing Rice a little further forward was actually hurting them. And I was wondering, could other teams look at that? Another thing they were doing is they were bringing Danny Welbeck to be a number in midfield, to be an additional number, and they were playing to him. And it was too many play people for Arsenal to cover, and Brighton were really good with the combinations. And now it's not easy for every team to do this, but Brighton was able to do it, and we saw yesterday Bayern were able to do it, and with Arsenal, a couple pretty decent efforts early, but it seemed they fell a little flat after that. Saka miss and Gabriel miss was kind of showing up. Jesus had a miss as well. But it doesn't really matter because the game was really killed off basically after the second goal, where Havertz was able to score. And I did feel like Brighton was still in it, but this one did. It's what I said, before. What helped them, get into the game, stay in the game at this point was kind of their downfall. They've been so good at playing through Arsenal, kind of pressing them to where that's just all it takes is one bad moment for all of that good work to go away. And Enciso plays a horrible pass. Jorginho is able to intercept, and then Arsenal immediately break. Odegaard just plays a wonderful ball for Jorginho, continuing his run. And like I said, Jorginho is clever, and Havertz is able to get the final touch. And what's interesting is it probably didn't affect the goal, but I thought it was a little distracting how Saka was acting like his leg had been broken before this. He's on the ground, and then after Estupiñán pitched the ball, and then after Arsenal score, Saka's immediately getting back up, and he's good to go. He probably is going through pain. I think I saw something where um, he's played more minutes than like anyone under like 24 for the last like 3 or 4 seasons, which is not. I think that's been very poor management by Arteta. One thing you can maybe go at him is that, and I thought last year Saka, finished the season kind of playing on one leg, and it feels like he's struggling a little bit. And he was rested first Luton, where Reece Nelson was able to play, and Reece Nelson scored. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen a little bit more of that because yesterday it looked like he was limpering a little bit as well. He was spectacular yesterday as well. Not easy to do. Someone like Davies on Bayern, as pacey as he is, but Saka was actually giving him the run around and scored a beautiful goal as well, and maybe nearly drew a PK at the end. But he's playing every single minute, and every time he's limping after the game, so he's struggling a little bit, and it is surprising they haven't done better to maybe manage his minutes a little bit more. But the thing I just don't like is the rolling around. Now maybe he is in pain, but it's happening every single time. But it is what it is. He's still a young player. I can't. They said he's only 22, and that feels crazy to me. But I guess he burst onto the scene when he was like 17 or 18. So and we're starting to see Foden really come to the stage, and it's crazy to see how young he is. I think he's only 20. I think they said 24 or 23 as well. So I mean, technically, these players haven't entered their prime. So that's something to think about as well. And and then we have Brighton kind of made their changes after that. So De Silva brought on Yao Pedro. I thought he should have started. Then Facundo Buenete for Enciso and Modar. And then Arteta did take off Saka and Jesus, brought on Martinelli and Trossard, and basically that led to their third goal, which flattered them a little bit, but at the same time, it is a fantastic goal. And again, um, it's one of those situations where maybe Trossard learned from last week, which you like seeing. So many players don't really like sprinting, which you understand, but here Trossard did not slow down and continued his sprint. And because he slowed down, I actually think Carlos Baba was able to run back and stop it. But instead, Trossard did not try to hesitate, did not try to slow down at all. Kept his foot on the acceleration, and was able to, when he got to the goal, had a nice little dummy, and was able to get the keeper to go to ground and able to flick it over him. So really nice finish. And then at the very end, it looked like Brighton was maybe about to score with Pedro, and Gabriel was able to get a block, celebrating it, celebrating that clean sheet. And that's kind of another thing as well. I can go at Arsenal for their attacking a little bit here and there. I can't go with them for their defending. They've been quite stellar defensively, not just being number one in the league, but just the teams, at least from the turn of January, have not been able to get shots on goal. They've had so many games where the XG has been under one, sometimes under point 0.5. They've become a monster defensively. And yesterday, they're a fault of their own doing. Bayern were very good at being able to break on them, and there was maybe one moment in the second half where Coman was able to maybe slip in behind Gabriel and maybe nearly was able to score. Based, I think it was denied by the post. But for the most part, that was Bayern's Arsenal's real own doing. I think Saliba was kind of late and drew the PK, and Gabriel had the horror back pass. Other than that, Bayern weren't really able to create a ton themselves. So Arsenal are just really, really, really good. And they are where they are because on merit, and especially since the turn of the calendar year, they've been a different they've been different gravy. And the only thing I'm wondering is it possible to be able to play this way both in the Champions League and the rest of the season without having squad rotation, especially at the back end? We'll have to see. I mean, Arsenal 20 shots, 7 on target, 7 big chances for Arsenal. I thought it was a little misleading, but that is apparently what it was, because they were anemic from most parts of the game. But it is what it is. And the one thing I am wondering is now that Thomas Partey is back, is it time to maybe think about him instead of Jorginho? Now, the reason why you made the switch is because you think Declan Rice works better for you a little bit further forward. And Jorginho is very good at better at kind of threading those passes a little bit, being a little more progressive. But another thing too is if you can get behind Jorginho, he's not gonna be able to catch up to you where a Rice maybe would, maybe a Party would. That's kind of the one thing when I'm looking at Arsenal is where can you maybe hit them a little bit. I would probably target that. But another thing too is the way that they try to do their front press a little bit. I do think they're a little bit vulnerable in that situation as well. Now you need to have good attackers to do it, and unfortunately, not a lot of teams have that. And but it is what it is. 3 points is you get 3 points the rest of the way through. The title is yours. So they're not going to care what it looks like. Uh, and Havertz in the title run-in has been. Havertz has been a story all year. When he left Chelsea, when Arsenal paid all that money for him, people didn't know where he was going to fit. He didn't really work into the squad until like November, but since about November, I want to say like maybe right around the Villa game where Arsenal actually lost to Villa, but Havertz played well. It's been a different thing, and Havertz has actually started to score almost every single game week a little bit. Now he didn't do much versus Man City, but other than that, I think they said something like 6 or 7, maybe even 8, goals and assists for the last maybe 5 games or so for them, and he gets the big goal here. Uh, and then again, I mentioned it last week. Odegaard's work out of possession is unreal, and it maybe doesn't get talked about enough now, because it's one thing for Odegaard to be a clever 10, because you can be a Bruno, you can be a Cole Palmer. Odegaard is showing that he can play elsewhere. He can play deeper if that's needed, but he's an amazing presser without the ball, and Bruno can do that too. But the thing about Odegaard is it seems like he does it understanding of the system. Maybe Bruno needs a different system. But when you watch Odegaard, work, he is always almost like a second man flying to the ball and getting turnovers that way. He's almost one of the more complete midfielders in the league. To be honest, now I would maybe like him to have a little bit more end product, because of what he showed last season, but. Uh, Everything else that he's been doing has been absolutely remarkable. And if Arsenal do go on to win, go on to win some trophies, going forward, everyone will look at Rice, everyone will look at Saliba and Gabriel. It really will be a lot of the work that Odegaard has done. Uh, and the only kind of negatives was, Saka didn't look right. Jesus on the wing isn't really working. And Jorginho, I think, is gettable. So that's just kind of it. Uh, and the attention turned to Bayern, where instead of Lamptey and Dengra, they have Gate Davies, Coleman, and Sane. And I was wondering the way that Brighton were able to play through them, would Brighton be able to copy that? And it didn't necessarily copy it, but we did see something similar. Was so I mean, it finished 2-2, kind of a rundown a little bit with that game. Saliba and Gabriel mistakes for both goals. Sane was brilliant. It seems like Arsenal haven't necessarily played an attacker like Sane, to be honest, because it seemed I think it's Kilwar that played, did not necessarily know that Sane was able to turn him. He tried to get tight on him. That's what led to the second goal. Sane spun him, and then from that moment on, Jorginho isn't able to recover. and everyone was just kind of watching and too late to react. And then Saliba was able to was too late to react and drew the PK. And then Gabriel and Raya both kind of had a little mess up where at this point in the game, it almost felt like the commentators were saying Bayern were getting fully outplayed, and I think they were right. They were even saying that Bayern or Thomas Tuchel might have to think about subbing off Davies because Saka was giving him the fits. Ben White was playing almost like an additional attacker. He was playing further forward. Bayern didn't have a way to really mark all of them, and it was just they weren't able to get any kind of pressure on the ball either. It was really easy and comfortable game until that moment where I think the Bayern are just trying to clear the ball. The announcer even said something about Bayern can't even play out their own half, and then just Gabriel just had a mishap. I think the ball maybe got under him a little bit, but he got screwed up a little by David Raya just completely running out. So miscommunication and it cost them. Gnabry scoring at the Emirates was interesting as well. Former Arsenal player. Um, but the note I had here was I thought Art had a maybe of a funny bit of a funny halftime switch. Uh, so he brought on Jorginho. I mean, he brought on Zinchenko, keeping Jorginho on, but he brought on Zinchenko to take off Kilwar. Now you understand that maybe Kilwar is a center back, maybe playing out of position. It was interesting they didn't just go with Tomiyasu and just keep what they were doing. Instead, they almost like switched the formation a little bit. He moved Ben White to almost be like a third center back entirely, and he moved Jorginho to kind of play in midfield. And in a weird way, because you had Jorginho and Zinchenko together, it was almost redundant, and it almost allowed Bayern to not have to where Bayern were really struggling in the first half. After the switch, Bayern did not have issues at all in the second half. Actually, Musiala was able to get on the ball a lot more and was a lot more influential. So that change kind of backfired in some ways. Another thing too is you had Ben White that was really giving Saka was able to do whatever he wanted, and Ben White was always free. And you had Ben White and Saka and Odegaard, and Bayern didn't have a way to cover all of them. And after the change, you moving Ben White a little further forward, you didn't really have that, and so that was a bit of a surprise as well. Uh, but then that said, he also brought on Jesus and Trossard, and that led to the goal. And it was interesting to see uh, how you know Trossard is a very confusing player because you don't really know where to play him. I've kind of spoken that before, but I feel like you have to uh, because he gets into the situations where if Trossard is the one that gets the ball from it's a beautiful ball by Saka as well. But if Trossard is the one that gets the ball from Saka, has the nice little dribble, and then lays it off to Jesus, I don't think they score that goal. Now it's an easy finish. That's maybe daft, but just you need someone to be able to put away chances. Or Havertz, if Havertz is on the end of it, I don't think. I mean, maybe I would believe in Odegaard, but you need finishers to be able to finish those chances, and that's what Trossard did. He's a finisher, and I just don't get why we haven't seen him more, especially with Martinelli being out. Been a little surprised with that. And then Thomas Partey, came on at the very end and almost won the game with he did the one through ball that just Declan Rice or no one else was playing, and within 8 minutes was able to do a little bit more than what Jorginho had done all game. So I think with Thomas Partey back, he probably needs to start for them now going forward, and Bayern maybe get a little break because it looks like Saka is sticking his leg out, but at the other way to look at it is it nearly was a PK. If Neuer got it a little, if Neuer is a little late coming off his block, uh, maybe the PK is called. And another thing too is if the PK was called, I don't know if VAR would have overturned it. Uh, but Arsenal nearly won the game. They probably should have deserved it. Bayern were able to counter on them, but for the most part, Arsenal did control the game. And then with Brighton, the one thing I was thinking about is you need to do two things when you play this team. You play Arsenal. You need to play through their box four and break it by being brave. So you can do it by having a striker, dropping into midfield to be an extra number that they can't cover, and they did that. But they were not able to do step two, which is when you break through, when you get into the final third, be quick and make those moments count. In fact, one of the biggest criticisms I think people can make of De Zerbi is the lack of ideas when creating chances in the final third when it's not fully opened up. And yes, they've had a lot of injuries this year, but they had that issue a little bit last year as well. And when because sometimes so many cases when someone would be looking for an option upfield, it wouldn't be there. Relbeck would be too far behind the play, and the wide players would be marked, covered, or didn't have the pace to take on the fullback. And so I was thinking you almost need to have two strikers playing behind one another. Uh, Bayern have Musiala and Kane, and it almost seems like that's what they did. Brighton have Yao Pedro, who could have done something similar, and it was a shame that we didn't necessarily see that. But the other thing too is the Bayern don't have someone like a Carlos Bela to play in the middle. They have a Goretzka, but that basically is what they did as well. So uh, I thought the other kind of remaining notes is I didn't feel like Mulder worked again, but because it to play pretty progressive football, it requires you can pass the ball and keep it. Everyone, a lot of teams are able to do that, but to be able to pass, forward, you need to have athletes with pace to run upfield into channels because that's what keeps the defense honest. Brighton don't have that now without Matoma and Marsh and et cetera. They do have a Dingra, and a Dinga looks to be a promising one for the future, but really it was only him. I thought Carlos Baleba was quite good again as well, but just not enough depth at the back line to handle the injuries or the front line. And there is a lot of talk about De Zerbi now, and hardly any of it does feature Brighton next year, so I don't really know. But that is kind of life at that level. But yeah, I don't know what Brighton have for succession plans, but I feel that they always do. Grant Potter is still available, and that would be an interesting story. But Thiago Mata of Bologna has been doing some really impressive things as well. Now he's been linked to like Barcelona. But the other thing too is, he's Italian. He plays possession based, football as well. Similar kind of setup. The only thing I was thinking about is Bologna would be in Champions League next year. They're in a Champions League spot at the moment. Would he leave to just go to the EPL? That is what De Zerbi did. De Zerbi left Shakhtar to go to Brighton. But that's kind of where I'm at. I haven't really seen any. No one really knows what the idea is, so you haven't necessarily seen links for who they would look at. But I was just kind of wondering about that. And then I'll move on to Man City and Crystal Palace, and then kind of do the quick run through, and that'll probably be the end that I do of that. Uh, so this game ends 4-2. Brighton Palace actually scored the first goal with Mateta in the third minute. You were wondering, could this actually be a great Saturday? And it turned out no. Kevin De Bruyne is still playing, so no. Kevin De Bruyne was able to make it 1-1. A wonderful goal in his own right. Just gets it on the. I think Jack Grealish was able to draw some attention. He's able to find De Bruyne, who played on the left. That was interesting as well. That was a bit of a change. And De Bruyne was able to get a touch and then just pick the corner from the angle, and just a wonderful goal. And then Rico Lewis, I thought played really well versus Aston Villa in the midweek. Was rewarded with another start and played well again. And I think Jack Grealish as well was able to get the ball in the wing, and Jack Grealish played a role in all three goals, or all four goals almost. And I think he has a cross, and it goes into the box, and then it finds Rico Lewis, and Rico Lewis has a nice put away, and then Holland. Holland was not in the game at all, but he ends with a goal, and it's that Grealish and Kevin De Bruyne connection again. Grealish again was able to draw the attention onto him. He's able to play Kevin De Bruyne the ball towards the byline, and then Kevin De Bruyne has a cutback ball, and Holland's able to run onto it. Holland at that point had only had like 12 touches in the game. I made a tweet that. Mateta had more touches, more involvements than Holland at halftime. Before that, but it doesn't matter because Holland was able to score. Though, as we saw yesterday, they're struggling to get him involved, especially versus these big clubs. Especially with these clubs that have center backs that elite center backs that can handle him physically. So that's something that Pep needs to try to work out a little bit. Uh, and then take Kevin De Bruyne with the fourth goal, and again Jack Grealish. This time Grealish was able to every single time he was really good at drawing attention, getting numbers to go to him, which was leaving other people open. And Grealish had a nice little pass to Rodri. Rodri laid it off, and then De Bruyne had a really nice hit. And then Edouard at the end, made it a little respectable. But Palace were out of it, and I do worry a little bit for them, to be honest, because things don't necessarily look better. Now, the one thing you can say is, as they started the game, and then he was taken off for Elise. And so you would finally have Olise and Eze back, potentially. But yeah, Palace, Palace was starting to have some issues at the back, which is not good. So, no Chris Richards, who had been starting for them. So you have Jefferson and Lerman now having to play in the back line, and what that means is you're having Adam Wharton. You don't have that Lerman and Wharton connection in midfield. You have Will Hughes getting minutes, and Hughes is not necessarily he's not really good enough on the ball. When Palace were trying to pass and trying to do things with it, it was getting to Hughes, and Hughes was giving it away. Uh, but that was they had their moments. That said, that they had their moments. Man City did not start off well, and weirdly enough, it was Rodri that was the player that wasn't necessarily starting off well for them. Maybe he's been overplayed, uh, but he was getting some turnovers, and Palace were getting looks. Eze had a look. Ayew had a couple. Two or three. There was one moment when it looked like Rodri had a really terrible pass to the keeper. It forced Ortega to actually have to do a Cruyff turn to be able to get around Mateta. And then right at halftime, it looked like Eze was taken down for a PK on Gvardiol, and that maybe that could have been called. And who knows that maybe Palace score and they go into the game 2-1. Maybe it is different. But they didn't necessarily get that luck to go their way, and then Man City really did take over in the second half with De Bruyne. And the interesting thing about that is Phil Foden was the story versus Aston Villa. Kevin De Bruyne was not able to play that game, or Phil Foden was picked over Kevin De Bruyne, and then De Bruyne comes in for this game, and Phil Foden was set. And then as we saw yesterday, Kevin De Bruyne, I guess, was ill, wasn't able to play, and Phil Foden was played instead. And it's one thing to do it versus Aston Villa on a Wednesday. It's another thing to do it at the Bernabeu on a Tuesday night. And Phil Foden maybe announced himself a little bit last night, which I'll get a little bit into that later on. But that's kind of where we are with this game. Palace with 7 shots, 4 on target, 5 big chances for City, 18 shots and 8. Man City were not really at their best, but it doesn't really matter because they were able to make their chances count. Uh, but I think, at the end, it was just, Kevin De Bruyne was there to save the day. Holland was able to get going. These kind of the notes I had. Foden was rested for Man City. I thought that was interesting. Doku as well. So we saw Oscar Bob, get a rare start. We saw Alvarez, get a start. We haven't really seen him in a little bit. I think Alvarez maybe even started versus Aston Villa. Holland was rested that game. Uh, and then really the main storyline was everyone was going at Jack Grealish. I think it was more Kevin De Bruyne, but Grealish, to his credit, was one of their better performers. And one thing you can say about him is so many people that play on the wings, they want to go where the ball is. They'll leave. Grealish is quite good at always staying near the touchline and receiving it, and then he leaves that space. But he's always an outlet, and I think that's what Pep really likes him for. It is he likes him as like spacing. He likes him but maybe being someone to receive it out there that forces your fullback to go out and cover out more, as opposed to a fullback being able to maybe guard someone else, and so it stretches out the defense as well. And that is one thing that Grealish has been good at. But here he was quite good at not only drawing double teams on him, but being able to actually play people in. Sometimes he doesn't always make the right decision there. But he did here, and they did get like 4 of their goals because of the decisions that Grealish was making. So fair play. But another thing too is John Stones is back, and watching what he did versus Real Madrid, it almost feels like John Stones is as important and integral to the squad as say a Rodri, as a Kevin De Bruyne. Because Pep likes doing all these goofy things with his center backs. He can't do it with Akanji. He can't do it with Ake. He can do it with John Stones, and John Stones was getting a significantly forward in the second half of that City game, or in the second half of that Madrid game yesterday, and that changed things because Real Madrid were actually. Bullying Man City a little bit in midfield. Rodri wasn't having the best game again. Kovacic was struggling to find feet, and it felt like Real Madrid had the physical advantage until Stones was starting to be a different number, and then things kind of changed a little bit. But that game was wild, which I'll get to later. But here, instead of seeing like instead of seeing like Gvardiol, and instead of seeing center backs played on the wings, we actually saw wingers this game. We saw that versus Aston Villa as well. So we saw Oscar Bob try it on the right, and Grealish. No Gvardiol, no Bernardo Silva. action. And to be fair, Bernardo Silva was quite good for Real Madrid yesterday. But another thing too was we saw Rico Lewis, played kind of next to Rodri. Rico Lewis had a good game. Uh, but it was interesting thing too is Kevin De Bruyne was played on the left, and they tried him with Alvarez. It feels like you could try that with Foden, or maybe maybe kind of flip it. The only thing there is majority of Palace's best moments did come from that side, where it seemed like it was really easy to get a run past Kevin De Bruyne, where you were able to get Munoz kind of going, and Munoz and Ayew were able to create a couple moments where it felt like they had City in 2v1s because De Bruyne isn't the best defensively. So that was the only kind of thing. So it allowed Palace to get some chances, but at the same time, City scored 4 goals, so who cares? Uh, and it took a while for Holland to get going. Basically a single touch in the second half, but it doesn't matter because he scores. And then, easy City do have the easiest remaining games left on the schedule, but it's the hardest fixture, I guess in the Champions League. But they have Luton after this. They have Forest. Forest could be a scare. They have Wolves. Wolves play all three teams as well. That's interesting as well. It's not just Spurs. Spurs as well. And then Brighton, West Ham, and they also have Chelsea in the FA Cup game, so it's an additional game. But yeah, Luton and Forest are going to be fighting for the EPL lives. So and Spurs are battling for Champions League. So we'll have to. And if both City and Arsenal advance, they have to play each other 2 times in between all that. So there's still a couple ways for this to have roadblocks. And the game yesterday was spectacular, at least for the neutral. Uh, it was very interesting to see how Pep tries to limit transitions, and Real Madrid had no issues getting Vinny and Rodrigo in behind. Man City did not have Kyle Walker, and that probably showed. Akanji wasn't able to handle either Vinny or Rodrigo. They were kind of lucky, to be honest, that a couple of those transition moments didn't lead to more goals than they got. But Phil Foden was spectacular, and especially in the second half. First half, it took a while for him to actually get going a little bit, but second half, not just the goal, even before the goal, you saw him, being played a little bit more on the right hand side. It looked like he was doing a little bit better to turn and get more involved. Actually, he even has a big turn that leads to the Gvardiol goal. That gets City further up the field. So I thought that was a little change that we saw. Um, but I mean, just that felt like that probably should have been in the final. That feels like the 2 best teams, but we'll have to see because Man City don't always play that spectacular of an entertaining game, and it was quite something yesterday. Uh, and still 1 leg to go. So I guess that's maybe one good thing that wasn't final. Another thing is because you don't have the away goal, it's all to play for it now. Both teams went for it. Both teams are going to go for it again. So we'll see what Man City have left for the second leg. We'll see if Kevin De Bruyne gets into the squad now or not. Maybe Pep will like to play Phil Foden instead, which is I never would have imagined saying that. But the other thing too is Kyle Walker back could be everything, and Real Madrid were playing Chouamini as part of one of the defenders, and Chouamini's not going to be able to play in the next game, and so we'll see how Real Madrid are able to handle that. But there was this spectacular Champions League game, but it maybe took some out of him. We'll have to see. We'll have to see about that. Foden looked like he got stepped on even before that. Uh, but that's kind of where we are at least for that. And then with Crystal Palace, I think Adam Wharton showed something. Man City get Palace get the opening goal because of a great through ball to Adam Wharton that they're able to find Mateta, and then Mateta is able to run past Stones and Diaz. Uh, and Eze and Elisa back, maybe gives them a little hope. Mitchell and Munoz can do a decent job going forward to help them. I thought Andre Ayew was lively, but also poor. So that's kind of important. That's the give and take a little bit there. And they do have Liverpool next, and they did give Liverpool a tough game. This one's going to be at Anfield, so I guess that'll give me a little hope there at least. But it was a tough game, and then Ayew actually got sent off in that game, kind of controversially. And Liverpool needed Elliott to score a screamer to actually win that game. But and they do have a 5 point gap for safety. But that said, I think out of all the teams out there, this is the one I think I have the least faith in. If Palace get to a point where they actually are trailing someone and they actually have to go and pick up some points, because I don't really think they can do that. The one saving grace is Eze and Olise, maybe both back fit, can help them. but the other one of those teams that they're trailing or that they have a little of a gap is Nottingham Forest. And thankfully, things didn't go against them in the next game. So I'll go with Tottenham and Nottingham Forest. Tottenham go on to win 3-1. See how we're doing for time. And I'm gonna have to speed up. Tottenham go on to win 3-1. It was a very kind of a nerving game though. It was 1-0 with a Muriel own goal, and then Chris Wood was able to make it a 1-1, and then Chris Wood actually had a chance to make it 2-1 with a bit of a miss. Forest were competitive at least in the first half, and then second half was all Spurs getting a wonderful goal by Van de Ven, which you wouldn't really expect, just a massive hit, and then Boro kind of likewise with an absolute screamer in his own right. I thought it was interesting though how coming into this, Madison had been subbed early in the last 2 games, which Olsen has been fit but hasn't really been playing. Brennan Johnson versus former club, that was kind of a storyline coming into this, formerly of Nottingham Forest, and he played him in the first meeting, and actually it didn't go well. He actually, had to go off for having a head injury. And then with Nottingham Forest, Gio Reyna was starting to get some decent minutes, but only got 10 minutes this game, unfortunately. And in a game that they couldn't really control the ball in the second half, so I feel like Reyna maybe should get more minutes. So starting lineup, we have Poro, Romero, Mickey Van de Ven, Udogi, then Basuma and Sar. That's a bit of a storyline coming into this. Basuma actually had a role for the first goal, but Basuma and Sar were both subbed off at halftime for Betancourt and Hoiberg. And then Madison was able to stay on, and then Johnson, Sonny, and Werner. And that's kind of a thing to think about as well. Werner hasn't just come in and been just kind of a squad player. He's actually uh, been someone that Anja has seen as a day in and weekend starter for them, and to get him on loan, this doesn't always work out well. Chelsea with João Felix last year would be a good example because it's very weird how when you're bringing in a player, they're on loan, they're not really part of the club. They're just kind of someone for hire, but you never really know how well that's always going to fit. It's a temporary thing. They know it's temporary, but here Warner is playing like he really wants to get into that Europe Germany squad for Euros. I think it's hosted in Germany, and he's making a decent case that he deserves to at least be not necessarily a starter, but to at least make that squad because he is quite a one thing that he's impressed me about is he's got a much better uh, left foot than I realized. I always thought he played on the left and he only had a right foot, but he's got some really great crosses, and basically they get the own goal because of a cross that he has. Brennan Johnson is quite good at crossing the ball too. You see so many teams when they play with their wide players that they play these quote unquote inverted players because they cut into their stronger foot, and that usually makes the pitch kind of smaller when you're doing that. I think when Johnson plays, he keeps width. That allows Pedro Porro to actually play a little inside. That you get the better of Pedro Porro. And when Werner plays, you're kind of doing the same thing with Udogi. Udogi likes kind of playing inside and almost the way that Spurs play their fullbacks. It's unique. And sometimes it can be got at. Forest were actually having fun getting behind them a little bit. They were trying to attack them down the wings themselves, and they had some success doing that. I think that's actually how they got their first goal. Uh, but things changed in the second half because another thing too is when Spurs are good at keeping the ball, you can do a lot of this, and it's harder to defend. The only reasons for the fullbacks being out of position for you to hurt you is if you lose the ball. That's another thing to think about as well. But I really like the way how Spurs have Johnson and Werner because when they're playing wide, they're really good at getting crosses in. They're really good at they can go both ways. They can cut inside, but they're also a threat to get to the byline and to do cutback crosses. And so they're Spurs are not necessarily out of this now. It's actually a great weekend for them because what happened with Aston Villa and because Aston Villa blew a 2-goal lead to Brentford, which I'll get to shortly following this. And I think Spurs maybe have maybe passed Aston Villa for Champions League now, and I think they even have a game in hand. So not the best weekend for Unai Emery and Villa, and they also have Arsenal, coming up. So, but that said, Spurs also have a much harder schedule to end with. They have all three of Arsenal, Liverpool, and City to play with still. But uh, I really do every game about them. I like it. I like how Forward thinking they are. I like how they take risk. The only thing you can say is they now you don't really want to rely on a fullback and an own goal and maybe your center back to get your goals. So it is surprising they don't play Richarlison a little bit more. Um, but that said, they have Mickey Van de Ven back, and with him and Romero, they're a different team. They're a different team defensively, and I we'll see what they're able to do. Down the stretch, as well. And it was the only thing to say about is Madison hasn't necessarily seemed to fit for the last couple of games. Now I think he played a role maybe for the third goal, but he had been being subbed. And the thing to talk about there is I don't really know where Kulusevski fits if it's not going to be played from in Madison's stead because I like Brennan Johnson playing instead of Kulusevski a significantly more. I think he offers because he can go both ways. It's much harder to defend than Kulusevski, who likes cutting in because that takes away what Pedro Porro likes to do. He likes playing inside. Uh, so I don't really know where you play Kulusevski other than necessarily the Madison role, and it seems like that's kind of been where he's been playing. The other idea is maybe you can try Kulusevski kind of deeper because he is a good at ball winning, and we saw that I think for Severton a couple of months ago. I think Porum works better playing in the pockets, and you can't really do that with Kulusevski. It kind of closes things up. Uh, and with Madison, do you get into a situation where you don't want to have the Bruno situation, but you kind of do, where if can Madison play a position other than the 10, where he has to be, that has to be like the lone 10. Can he do a little more defending? Can he play a little bit deeper? Can he do what Odegaard does as opposed to like the Bruno role? That's kind of the only situation to say. And uh, uh, it is kind of unfortunate as well because coming into this before his injury, and I guess like November, Madison was up there for player of the season. The way he started, and but that is kind of the way it goes. Sometimes you don't want to just be reliant on one artist to create all your stuff. That's kind of that's kind of the trap you can sometimes fall into. You've got Porter that can be a 10 in makeshift moments. You've got other guys. Son likes dropping in, and he can be like a 9, 10. He can be whatever you need as well. And sometimes you need Madison to maybe make those runs out wide. Maybe you need Madison to drop back a little bit more. Uh, but I don't really know. And then that's kind of the only thing to say. I mean, Villa did have the slight edge going into the weekend, but because of what they did with Brentford, they now have the spot themselves. Tottenham do, and that's important as well. I mean, fifth spot might get Champions League, but we don't really know how that is going to play, and we'll see if that catches up, or we'll see. I think they're in front of the table because of goal difference, like maybe even on points, but they have a game at hand. And then with Nottingham Forest, they were competitive in the first half, and maybe if the Chris Wood miss doesn't happen, it's not the easiest chance in the world, and it's not really a howler, tight angle. That could have been something. I think another thing too was Madison gave a little fist, like a little welcome to Ryan Yates early in the or late in the first half, and it was maybe lucky VAR didn't actually have a look at that to send Madison off, which would have completely changed the outcome because Madison not only Spurs going down a player, Madison played a role in the third goal. Um, and one thing you can say for Nottingham is Chris Wood keeps scoring for them, so that's positive. But Nochi Arena is disappointing, and it's not just because Americans want to watch Arena get minutes because he wasn't able to do that at Dortmund. But watching Danilo and Ryan Yates play, it's clear when Reina comes on, he offers the team more on the ball. I think he played. You can play one dual winner, kind of holder next to him, and get Gio Reyna involved. Gio Reyna can get involved in your build up. He can find Morgan Gibbs White the ball with his feet, or Elanga, or Hudson Odoi, or Wood, and get them more involved in the attack. He only played 10 minutes and was seven. He was 4 for 7 in ground duels and didn't misplay a pass. And he was very, very good, coming on versus Fulham, and very good the week before as well. So a little disappointing. We're not seeing a little bit more of him. And then with Forest, they're now tied on Luton with points because of what happened with Luton. And yeah, I think they're just ahead maybe on goal difference. But Forest had a little cushion before this, and you can see how quickly that vanished. And Brentford next with so they're on I guess 25 points, and then Brentford's next with 29. and which is cutting it close too, and that kind of gets us to Aston Villa and Brentford in a game that did not make sense what this was. Brentford, I guess maybe maybe remembered a little bit what happened uh, with Man United, and were able to rectify that a little bit. A story coming into this though is no Ivan Toney, so we saw in Bremo and we saw Weiser kind of tag teaming together. Something we saw a little bit towards the end of the season last year as well, where it actually ended up working out a little bit, and we saw almost a return of that. But it took a while for them to get going because Aston Villa had the 2-0 lead, and really Brentford were not competitive to start the game. So Watkins with an early goal. Basically, he gets the header. I think he beats Ayer to the ball. Maybe not the best defending in the box. It's been a bit of a criticism for Brentford. And then Rogers gets a second right before halftime in a wonderful little pick out by Tillmans. Tillmans was kind of running things for Aston Villa, through the middle. Lots of really clever slip balls. Plays Morgan Rogers here, then he has a nice little touch to cut inside, and then he has a great little left foot finish. Uh, but then things changed. All of a sudden, Brentford were able to, I think, get a free kick, and Flecken goes long, and they're able to win a kind of a header, and then they can take a quick header, and they're able to, I think they get a Regulon. Regulon just sends a cross into the box, and that's defended, or at least nothing comes from that. But I think Damsgaard's able to get on the end of it, and then Damsgaard just kind of he's either trying to hit himself or he's just trying to cross, and he hits it really hard. It just kind of deflects off Sanka to go in, kind of a freak goal. But after that, all of it was all Brentford's own doing. They really started to get Regulon the ball more. They were able to find ways to kind of isolate Aston Villa a little bit on the wings. Konsa did not look comfortable defending out wide, and it looked like Diego Carlos and Paul Torres didn't look comfortable defending in the box. And basically, they were getting Regulon the ball, and he was swinging the ball in uh, from out wide, and Regulon's got really good delivery on him, as we saw versus Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. It was interesting, or it was big for Brentford to have Regulon back because they lost him versus Burnley after that goofy kind of challenge, 5 minutes into the game that got him sent off. That's the reason why Brentford had to play down a man, for 80 minutes or whatever it was first Burnley. So they were missing. They were definitely missing Regulon. They probably would have used him versus Man United had he been available. Uh, which would have been funny because he was at Man United to start the season, but he's a Tottenham player. But man, did you see what he offers? Which is really good delivery, and it pays off. So here, no one's able to mark in Bremo. Paul Torres is, I guess, is ball watching, not really marking in Bremo, and Bremo's able to get a leg to go in, and then Weiss is able to get the third, which is also comes from, I think, a Regulon kind of cross, just cross into the box again. It's one of those where Konsa doesn't really know how to, which player to necessarily mark. It looked like Brentford were doing better to kind of give him 2v1s. And I think it's a switch maybe from Jensen, and they get the ball on the wing, and then it's a really nice cutback cross, and Weiser is just there for the easy finish. Really poor by Diego Carlos again as well, and then Watkins is able to get the third to at least allow Villa to come away with something. They probably did deserve it, but it's another one of those situations where uh, they took Regulon off and then brought in Lewis Potter, and Lewis Potter doesn't do as well as maybe he should to get close enough to stop Leon Bailey from getting this cross off. And then Flecken maybe could have done better to actually get to the ball, but Watkins is able to just kind of beat him in the air. And there you go, 3-3. It could have been worse, for Brentford actually, because after that goal, the final 10 minutes they were defending for their lives a little bit in the second half. Villa had them kind of penned in a little bit. So. Watkins, a former Brentford player, as was Konsa. So they came back to try to haunt their former B side. I thought Emery took the game, the City game, the week before this, or the midweek game, easy, and all of a sudden Watkins, Leon Bailey, Emery Martinez, Paul Torres, Tillmans magically recovered and were fit. So that was a little annoying. And then with Brentford, they had Villa on the whips back in December before Ben Mee got sent off. Even before that, and then Villa came back, and you were wondering, would that happen again? And it almost did. So we get started with Diego Carlos, Paul Torres, and then Digna, and then Tielemans, Luiz, kind of in the middle. The only thing about that, Tielemans is very, very good at threading balls in. The only issue is you don't really have kind of a traditional holder or someone that's really good at winning the ball back in that midfield, where you're missing Barbecue Kamara, and then Leon Bailey, and then Rogers on the left. Interesting to see, Musa Diaby kind of benched, but Roger scored, so you can't necessarily go with that. And then McGinn and Watkins, they've been missing McGinn for a little bit for a red card as well. I think he got a red card for Spurs. They had him back, and it took a while for him to get going because I thought he wasn't necessarily well into the game in the beginning, but he started to actually have some really nice delivery. Anytime he got the ball out wide, he was sending some really nice crosses in. And then with Brentford, we saw Zanka, Ayer, Collins, and then Janelt, Damsgaard, Jensen, Regulon, and Roslov, and then Bremer and Weiser. So no Ivan Toney to start, and then Damsgaard started over the kid Yarmouk. And it took a while for Damsgaard to get going as well, but he played a big role in a couple of these goals in the second half. So that's kind of where we are with that. Let's see. Aston Villa with 11 shots, Brentford with 8, 3 on goals though. Uh, and then 11 corner kicks for Aston Villa, 70% possession. Brentford only with 169 passes. It took a while for Brentford to actually get going, and basically what they figured was, we'll just go long. We'll find ways to get regular on the ball, where it doesn't really matter how many passes we have. But the only thing about that is once you have the lead, you need to be able to keep the ball, and they weren't able to do that, and that's kind of the reason why Aston Villa were able to get back into the game. 2-0 up. The interesting thing was it was really easy for them to go long and find Regulon with a pass or two to get behind Konsa. Villa was still they like playing with their high line, but maybe you could have picked that moment to be more pragmatic because Tony wasn't playing. You didn't really have to worry about crosses into a packed box. You just had to worry about people basically getting behind you. So I was a little surprised about that. Watkins back in scoring. He missed the City game. Only game he misses is Man City. So of course, but he has more goal involvements than any other player this season. So I keep talking about player this season. So you have Rodri, Rice, McAllister. I do think Watkins has to be in that conversation, if not maybe leading in some ballots. And then no, the only thing negative here is so they have Arsenal coming up next, and one of the players of the season or one players of the game in the first meeting when they beat Arsenal was Douglas Luiz, and because Douglas Luiz got a very late yellow card, they're not going to have him for the next game. So that's going to help. That's going to help Arsenal. Uh, we'll see what they end up doing. Maybe it'll be someone like McGinn kind of played a little bit more kind of next to Tielemans. I don't necessarily know if I'd love that. They don't really have a traditional kind of holder. The other thing is they have someone called Iribangam, who we saw versus Man City, but he also looked young and looked a little inexperienced and uncomfortable versus Man City. But that can maybe be what they have to do. But not having Douglas Luiz could hurt them. So we'll have to see. I mean, obviously missing Kamara hurts them as well. And they struggled defending Brentford's crosses in the second half. And so, ball watching by Diego Carlos and Paul Torres. And I keep wondering, is it the best to play Emil Konza at right back? Now you're missing Matty Cash, so maybe that's kind of forcing your hand. I think Konza is better as a center back. That's another thing too. If you had Kamara, you can maybe shift it around a little bit. So that's another way where his miss is showing up. But yeah, I think it hurts you because he's better at defending the ball, in the box than necessarily stopping the crosses. And obviously, as we saw in this game, Diego Carlos and Paul Torres weren't necessarily the best defending in the box either. So we'll have to see what Emmy decides to do versus Arsenal, and that's kind of a storyline as well. Unai Emery versus the team or versus the club that hired him, and basically the fans never rated him and kind of damaged his reputation a little bit. And he's gotten his looks in since then. I think his Villarreal team was able to beat Arsenal out of the Europa Cup a couple of years ago, and then obviously his team came back and beat them at the Villa Park back in December. So he has a moment to do the same. So we'll have to see about that. And it's also important too because the drop points here kind of gives the favor the advantage to Tottenham. So he's going to have to go into that Arsenal game and at least get a result, if not actually win, to take back the tide. We'll have to see. And then with Brentford, the no Ivan Toney to start, so it could have been worse. But they had Regulon back, and it turned out that was maybe the more important person to have back. But the Wise and Bremer thing is very interesting because again, we saw them have a terrific run last season. Towards the end of last season, and here, they're basically they work really well together. So there's a terrific run by Riza that basically sets up the third goal. So the first one takes out Konza away from Regulon, and then he zips past Diego Carlos, and that kind of goes unnoticed too. And it's a little different. With Tony, you kind of know where maybe he's going to be. It's a bit, I don't want to say like Holland, but defenders have basically are asked, you know what's going to come, can you defend it? With them, they make different runs. You don't never know where they're going to actually go. Um, and we haven't really seen that a lot this season. When Brima's been hurt, or Weiss has been hurt, or they had African Cup of Nations, were both what we're missing. So it's big that they have both back. If nothing else, it gives them a little bit more of a different look. And another thing too is Jensen and Damsgaard were much better in the second half, at least progressing things forward. They decided not to just try to play through Aston Villa. They just like, we'll go over the top. You're going to play a high line against us. We'll go over the top. Uh, but the only thing negative is defending crosses in the box is still bugaboo. Now, Ethan Pinnock and Norgard are missing, and they could possibly return. I think they said mid-April to late. So that could be big. They've got 3 games here to where this is going to show up for them. So we'll have to see, and I'll get to that. But another thing too is their midfield is missing something. Yamaluk rescued for Damsgaard. It took Damsgaard played well in the second half, but it took a while for him to get on the ball. But they were just maybe someone like a Batiste that made a good game versus cameo versus Burnley. Uh, they're missing something where no matter how good your attackers are, you need to be able to get them the ball, and they're missing some kind of midfield creation. I don't think they've been able to necessarily fix that since losing Christian Eriksen. They need to address that this summer, if nothing else. But yeah, they're just kind of it's very chaotic, I guess you could say. Now, can it be enough to keep you up? I think it could, especially versus the teams they're going to be playing against, because the teams will be one, they'll be probably with worse back lines. So that'll maybe play into the advantage of someone like a Tony to be able to kind of dunk on them. But another thing too is those games are going to be uh, the cup finals for all 3 teams, because how do you you're playing against relegation competition. But so Brentford have at least gotten to a situation where they control their own fate. You can say, but through Man United, Brighton, and Aston Villa, they would have come away with 3 draws. And I think a buddy of mine that's a Brentford fan, he remembered looking at the schedule and was thinking the absolute worst. He was he especially losing Norgard, losing Pennick for all those games, uh, and they've actually done a decent job. Through that little stretch, and here maybe they could have even gotten more points. But now the dogfight happens, because it's Luton, Sheffield, Everton, and then it's Bournemouth and Fulham, which is another thing too. Bournemouth and Fulham probably don't have anything to play for. Now, there's a weird kind of online rivalry between Fulham and Brentford, because of their time in the Championship. But I don't really think the players are going to specifically care. But we'll have to see. But it's not the worst schedule for Brentford to end off. So if they can get just 3 wins and a draw, 7 points in the next 3 games, I think that would be enough to clinch it. But we'll have to see. Um, and then especially you'll have Ivan Toney back. I think he was only out for a scare. But one of those teams that they are kind of trailing is Luton, and Luton and Bournemouth, and Luton go on to win dramatically. 2-1 at the very end. Luton are very good at scoring late goals. That's kind of another thing that we've seen as well. So Tavernier with a terrific hit. He hit the post in the first half, and then Jordan Clark. With a really nice little run, and he was able to. I think the ball kind of bounced his way, but it was a really nice turn before the run. So it was nice actually to see him be played next to Ross Barkley. So you finally found a little pivot partner since Samuel Okonka's been out for a little bit, and Clark had a really nice game. He seemed to have a pocket of energy everywhere. And he had a good finish on him. So there you go, 1-1, and then Carlton Morris, who was quite good in the second half as well. Hit the post a couple of times. Just it seemed Bournemouth had no ideas how to defend him. He was very good at being direct, very good at just being in the box, and he's not really flashy, but what he's good at is he's good at creating chances. Getting looks, and Luton exploded in the second half of this game. They had something like, I don't know, like 5 shots in the first half. They had like 14 or 15 in the second half. They really did deserve to at least get something, and not only something, they win it at the very end. And Luton have to. I don't know what Bournemouth and Luton have done to each other, but For some reason, these two games have been some of the best in the league. You know, Luton were beating Bournemouth 3-0 just a couple of months ago. And we got that 7-goal thriller because Bournemouth came back and got 4 goals at the very end. And even before that, Luton and Bournemouth, squared up. This was the game that had to be called off after Tom Locklear had his cardiac incident. So there's been a lot of drama anytime these two teams have shown up, and it happened again. And with Bournemouth, it's one of those situations where you don't really know what they have to play for, and you don't really want to attack a team's or manager. But I'm sure the manager wants something out of that better out of his team. But they're they it doesn't look the same. They're not necessarily pressing the same. They're defensively they look gettable. And it hasn't been necessarily the same. Another thing, Cook and Christie and Clivert, could Tyler Adams, do a little bit better? I thought Tyler Adams was quite good for them versus Everton. Maybe he was penalized for almost drawing a PK on Calvert Lewin, but for the most part, I thought he actually played a good game. But he hasn't been able to get minutes since then. Semenya, Solanke, and Tavernier. I mean, they're spoiled for attacking options. So the only thing is do you have your midfield good enough to be able to find them? Because you also have Sanistera, you also have Philip Billing, you also have Watatara, Django Watatara. And the only thing to say is Philip Billing came on and he actually played in midfield, and I thought he got done a little bit by Jordan Clark. And then with Luton are finally getting healthy again, slightly. They have Berkey back, so Mengi and Berkey back in the back line, and then Barkley and Clark. And Barkley continues to just kind of have a little of a player of the year shout as well, just for what he's been able to do with Luton. But then Townsend, Chung, and then Morris. And the interesting thing about here is Townsend and Chung started the game, and the subs that Rob Edwards made were quite influential. So it was around the 65th minute mark. So he took off Townsend for Ani Dima, who inserted some spark and pace into the game, but he also took off. He brought on Barry for Hashioka and Carly Woodrow on for Chung, basically in like the 88th minute. And Carly Woodrow has the cross that Morris is able to score on at the end. So Robert Edwards is starting to get better at making some subs and having those subs lead to late goals, whether they're winners or late draws, dramatic draws. So if Rob Edwards is starting to really show off his chops a little bit, impressive enough. So yeah, 19 shots and I think 15 in the second half, 9 on target in the second half as well. All 9 came in the second half. Luton with a 1.4 xG, Bournemouth with a 0.4. Tavernier had a wonderful goal. He also hit the post. But for the most part, Bournemouth struggled. Only 8 shots and 1 on target. They weren't able to get Solanke involved much. Only 222 passes. They don't pass the ball enough for me. That's why I feel like someone like an Adams can maybe help them, or the Alex Scott, because they're good at transitions. They're good at getting on the ball and running. But can you control a game? Can you see it out? I mean, Luton had 300. Luton now passing by 80 passes, 75% accuracy as well. And another thing with Luton is it felt like there was a directive in the second half where they pressed with significantly more intensity to create turnovers and transition more in the second half. So that was another thing too. Once Luton really went at them, Bournemouth couldn't keep the ball. So that was the reason. That was another reason why they were able to get a lot more shots. So yeah, I mean, even now on points for Forest, it took a while for it. It felt like there was maybe even a little bit of a gap, and then kind of what I've said again is a bit like with Gary O'Neill's Bournemouth last season. Rob Edwards is starting to get his subs right. Because on more than a few occasions, he's had a second half sub come on, and put in a cross or get a key goal in the final 10 minutes of a game. And it happened again with Woodrow here. And then with Bournemouth, Clivert hit the post as well. I forgot about him. So you have a lot of these attacking options, but how can you keep them the ball? And they are in that kind of awkward phase now. So we'll see how they have to handle that. And then kind of the big relegation fight of the weekend was Everton and Burnley. And unfortunately, when you get big games like that with the bottom team, it becomes a situation of, well, don't lose the game. And sometimes it's not always the best games. And we didn't really get the best game here, but we did get a goal. And we got a goal in the most weird, kind of chaotic fashion. And it's very similar to what actually happened in the Liverpool game in the midweek with Luton and Darwin Núñez. So Calvert-Lewin basically was able to to get Muric to kind of bait him a little bit. Muric took too long to clear the ball and basically cleared it, and Calvert-Lewin jumped in front of it and basically deflected it in. And just a horror moment for Muric and Burnley. And then things only got worse because in later in the second half there was a poor pass back to one of the defenders. I think it's O'Shea gets the ball and he takes a poor touch. McNeil is right there. He's able to press and win it, get the turnover, and then O'Shea takes McNeil out, and McNeil is basically going to be in on goal. So O'Shea is the last man out, and so it's an immediate red card. So immediate sending off, and they weren't able to recover from that. So it's really their own doing. Uh, and it comes at a point when Burnley have actually come into a little bit with momentum. I think they drew versus Wolves. Oh, they came into the back with basically 4 unbeaten. Now they hadn't actually turned those into wins. That's the only thing. But at least they were starting to be a little bit more competitive. They were quite good versus Chelsea playing down a man as well. It was 2 weeks in a row they've had to play down a man with some red cards. And you just wonder, is it maybe too little, too late? Is it too much for company to overcome? People are going to, there's a lot of times when you look at the manager because they're the kind of the face of the club. Sometimes you got to look at the players, and it's just two players made terrible mistakes, and that's kind of cost them the game. It wasn't really like Everton were really creating much themselves, but Everton were able to put a little pressure, and the pressure works. Everton only had 12 shots and 3 on target. Calvert-Lewin started, got the goal, but didn't really do anything other than that. Beto came on in the second half, had a chance to actually have a little bit of a fast break, and wasn't able to make anything of it as well. And Everton had 200 passes and 68% accuracy. It was just don't lose it after you got the goal. Don't give the ball up in the middle. So they just kind of went long, and they just it was fine not having the ball. It was all about just kind of defending Burnley, keeping Burnley in front of you. Burnley were not able to really get behind them. Um, so, I mean, I was surprised that Seamus Coleman even started again. But one positive I do have is Andre Gomez. Andre Gomez, at least gives him a little something in the middle where I think he actually had the through ball that played better in. So that's at least something. Dwight McNeil gives him something as well. But Everton kind of look, if they're going to stay up, it's going to be one of those jobs where you really do praise Sean Dyche because quality wise they just aren't necessarily at the level. But it doesn't really matter because they are getting points when they need it. It was a massive win here. And it especially comes when a time when it looks like they may even suffered a 2-point deduction after it. So I think they've dropped below Brentford, so they're still in the thick of this as well. And they don't have the easiest schedule, but they do have a lot of games at Goodison Park. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see about that. And with Burnley just orchestrators of their own downfall. And again, there have been moments when they've been playing well, being more competitive. We've started to see actually all 3 of the promoted sides start to be a little bit more competitive. Sheffield as well, but it just comes at a little moment maybe where it's too late. And speaking of Sheffield and Chelsea draw 2-2. Uh, ooh, in a bit of a wild game as well because you look at that and you think, oh, Sheffield just maybe got because Sheffield got a very late goal to make it 2-2. You think, oh, maybe Sheffield just only had 2 shots all game. Chelsea had 80% of the ball, and Chelsea had like 30 shots and just couldn't really finish. And the opposite happened. Chelsea did have 80% of the ball, but Sheffield had majority of the shots and majority of the better looks. And weirdly enough, I thought a couple of the Sheffield attackers outplayed Chelsea. I thought Ollie McBurnley outplayed Jackson, and I thought this new guy for Sheffield, Armblast, youngster Armblast, who gets another start. He's been a bit of a revelation for them since getting in the squad. He's very good with Fulham. I thought he played well with Liverpool as well, and he's kind of he makes little different decisions in the midfield. Another thing too is Gustav Harmer has been playing over McAtee. It doesn't seem like McAtee's playing at the same time. I think that's allowed Harmer to be a little bit more influential, and you're seeing a little bit more of an idea of what Sheffield can be. Bremerton Diaz and McBurnley play well together. They seem to have a really good connection with each other. And the only negative was Austin Trusty was tried as kind of a fullback, defensive-minded fullback, and he really struggled versus Nomi Madueke. But other than that, this was one of the more impressive performances that we've seen from Sheffield all season because they deserve to get something out of the game. And they get it basically at the very end with McBurnley kind of getting on a kind of on the end of a kind of a flick header at the very end. And another thing too is Chelsea went up with they did not follow up their Man United win with the same kind of lineup. Now I don't know if people were retired, but no Sterling again. We saw Sterling very late. But we saw no Gusto. They were missing Marlo Gusto, and that turned out to be a massive miss. So we saw Diazy, who's a center back, played at right back. He didn't really offer Matareke any kind of help. I thought Diazy didn't really offer a whole lot defensively either. And then Thiago Silva back into the squad. He actually gets the first goal. But Thiago Silva had a bit of a horror show after that. And then Chalobah did not have a best game either. And then Mark Cucurella, I think got hooked a little bit as well. Marco Corello kept getting, uh, I think he got kept losing people he was supposed to follow. I think he's beaten for the first goal, and then Caicedo, Enzo, and then Palmer played in the middle. I thought that was interesting. So Gallagher still played, but he was played on the left, and I didn't think that worked at all. And then Matareke and Jackson. Gallagher is not going to play on the wing. Doesn't really offer you anything, and he looked uncomfortable. He didn't really help Marco Cucurella out either. I thought Cole Palmer played in the middle. It took a while for him to get going as well. And then the other thing about that is when you play through the middle, you've got to be very good defensively. And I thought Chelsea were missing what Gallagher usually offers as far as out of possession, pressing. Where Palmer wasn't really doing that, and I thought it was really easy for Sheffield to actually play around Chelsea. Chelsea were just waiting for Sheffield to turn the ball over, and instead they kind of took control a little bit. After about it took a while. It took a while for it to happen, but after about maybe 30 minutes or so, they started to really play some nice stuff, and it was very unique. So let's see. So I have maybe the first Sheffield chance. Thiago Silva just runs to stop an attack and then just plays a really poor back pass to the keeper. That's really nothing. But Chelsea have full control of the ball. It's just kind of a question of when can you maybe get another breakthrough, and then so first there's a hard back pass, and it's surprised that Palmer kind of pulls up. It looks like he maybe could have actually spread it onto a loose ball, but after that Sheffield started to grow, and so they're moving it from Trusty's side. They find Bogle free unmarked on the other side of the field, and then he plays it to Armblaster, who turns with Palmer on his shoulder. He then finds Ollie McBurnley, who's open because there's free space because Thiago Silva and Chalba don't want to follow where McBurnley's running into. Nothing comes from this, but it mirrors how they get the goal. And so here, I mean, it really is a well-worked goal. And Chelsea look a mess, but Sheffield made them look a mess. So I mean, it's a lot of clever and quick passing from a team that we just haven't seen all year. So Holgate first plays a forward pass to Armblaster, who again turns with the ball, has a nice little carry to draw to Gallagher onto him, and that leaves Bogle open. And then Armblaster makes the right pass to Bogle, and then Bogle sees Harmer wide open on his side, and he plays in the ball, and then Harmer then plays a forward pass to McBurnley, who again is showing for the ball, who's wide open because again the center backs aren't following him. And then McBurnley basically, drives at the Chelsea back line. Then realizes when he runs out of the room, he's able to turn and is able to find Harmer again. And then Harmer has a bit of a Cruyff turn, and that freezes Mark Cucurella. And Chelsea just missed Bogle running in behind them. And then Harmer plays in a through ball that Bogle's able to make a run on sides, and Bogle has a real nice shot to beat Petrovic. Or it's probably a miss at cross, but it's a wonderful team goal. It really is. And just they catch Chelsea ball watching and not expecting Sheffield to turn it over. But that was just kind of it. I mean, there were a bunch of like kneeling moments for Chelsea to create something after that as well. But Chelsea only had 3 shots and 1 on target in that first half. Sheffield had 5 and 4, and things only got worse in the second half. I mean, it was a lot of this really came. A lot of the chances in the second half came to Sheffield. Uh, but that's Chelsea are the team that did go ahead after nobody Madueke. And one thing you can say about Sheffield is not only were they are they are in the table because they haven't been playing this kind of really nice clever football until now. They haven't been able to defend to save their lives. They're the worst defensive team basically ever. And what they do is they give up a corner kick goal when no one's marking Thiago Silva, and here they just allow Connor. I think it's Jackson who gets the ball on the turn, and then he gives it to Cole Palmer, and then Cole Palmer. It's a 2v1. Gives it to Nomi Madueke, and Austin Trusty just has no idea how to play him. and just allows Madueke to just dribble into the box, and then he has a nice little shot, kind of near post. It's a good hard shot, to be fair, and it is a good play by Madueke, but it's too easy. It's way too easy for him to just waltz into the box and beat the keeper near post, and so that's where you're at. I mean, it's another situation as well because it took a while for Chelsea to get to this, where Palmer was able to get the ball. He's able to turn and he's able to have people out wide of him in front of him. Now he's had that with Gusto. It had to be Madueke here, but he wasn't able to get that situation that often. But it led to a goal here. And then McAtee and Cam Archer and Susu came on the final 10 minutes for Sheffield. Wilder took off Holgate and Trusty, so took off two center backs for attacking options, and Pochettino kind of did the opposite. He took off Nicholas Jackson to bring on Cassidy, and I think he brought on some other defender as well to kind of see the game out. And instead, when you play defensive football, sometimes that's kind of what happens. Sheffield go long, Chelsea can't clear it. Sheffield then get a couple crosses in, both blocked, but Sheffield win the first header. I think it's either Vinicius or Hama be able to take on Mudryk, and then to keep the possession alive. And then there's another player that wins a second header. I think it's Cam Archer, so someone that just came on as a sub. And then the ball just finds McBurnley and he's able to finish it. So it was no more than Sheffield deserved, to be honest. I mean, 11 shots to 6 on target. To Chelsea's 6-3. Chelsea did have majority of the ball, but it was a weird game. It was not what you would expect. Chelsea coming off that Man United win at the very end, that drama-filled win. Would that carry some momentum? And the answer was no. Now, we also saw a different lineup. So I don't know if that necessarily showed up. I do think them missing Maldo Gusto was massive. You see just in one game what not having him showed. But also, Thiago Silva scores. I think his race is run. I think he made a number of errors all game. He couldn't follow McBurnley showing for the ball. Chelsea couldn't press Sheffield. And, so you're sitting off. You're waiting for Sheffield to kind of play through you, and they could. And here, it's just when you need your captain to win you a header, to win you the game, to keep you the points, he was nowhere to be found. I was surprised Mudryk was benched, and again, I think Armblaster and McBurnley outplayed Enzo Caicedo and Nicholas Jackson. So there you go. And then the one moment I have is about Cole Palmer, playing through the middle. I think you miss what Gallagher offers you in that position, at least out of possession. And the other thing is Madueke was the only direct threat, and he did things that Palmer couldn't really offer them. So how do you fit Palmer to best help this team? Now maybe you do this. Maybe it's different with Marlo Gusto being able to do that as well. But you don't want Palmer to become your version of Bruno Fernandes, where he can only play in one style. And that is the key question. Is his ceiling Bruno Fernandes, or is it Martin Odegaard? Someone that can play in multiple positions and different setups and do a decent job defensively. But that's kind of it. And then I mean, yeah, the lineup did kind of just to say it all. But and it was a missed opportunity as well. To sneak into that Europe spot. It would have taken them, I think, 1 point off Newcastle with a win here. Potentially 3 points off United and West Ham, and they are still alive in the FA Cup. I think they've drawn City, but they have had success for City. So, I mean, there's still time for Pochettino to maybe have something to show, to ask for another season back. If they could sneak in that Europa spot, similar to what I said with Man United, I think it would be a massive boost for them, because even in Conference League, because Pochettino has not had his first 11 fit all season. He probably doesn't even know what his favorite 11 is, and another game in the midweek each week would allow you to experiment a little bit more and maybe try different formations, try different tactics. And I think a team like Chelsea, as young as they are as well, it's not like this team is supposed to be veteran, aged and one that has to win now. This team is more in the recycling phase restarting a cycle with a lot of youngsters. And so I think an additional game week would significantly boost them. I think it's helped Liverpool actually to be in Europa this year. So we'll see if they are able to turn things around. And then with Sheffield, I mean, again, Chelsea, but Sheffield were better than they have been in recent weeks, and they gave Liverpool a scare. To be fair to them, And the only thing I'm thinking about is given how good McBurnley has played since coming off the bench, I don't get why he hasn't started more. He didn't start versus Liverpool. Doesn't have the pace, but has quite good hold up and seems to be a sense where to be in the box. And him and Brereton Diaz seem to work out quite well. And then Oliver Armblaster had 5 key passes, and he's just controlling things in the middle, making good decisions, keeps moving, keeps possessions going, being brave on the ball as well. When defenders are near him, being able to turn from them like he did for the Bogle goal. And it's not something that they've had all year. And then Hammer, they got Gustav Hammer from Coventry City, and it has always been the easiest of times. But he seems to be enjoying himself, being as like the lone attacking eight, not being next to a James McAtee. And I think he's benefiting also from Armblaster's inclusion. Armblaster's able to find him the ball more. And the only maybe negative was Jack Robinson has been an important defender for them. I think he's the captain, and it looked like maybe he picked up an injury at the end, which could be crushing because they're already without Chris Basham and Baldock, so that would be a scare. I mean, you could play Trusty, I guess, at the back and try someone else at the wing back spot. But that could be something to follow as well. It's probably too little, too late, but at least they're showing some fight. This is a team that did not look competitive at all just a month ago when Arsenal had 5 goals in them with after like 30 minutes, maybe even less than that, maybe 20 minutes. So and the only thing you can say now is they're conceding too easily still. They could have actually won this game, maybe even comfortably. You can't concede a free man on a corner kick, like 5 minutes into the game as well, and then Madueke just waltzed into your box. You can't do that. So, and then we'll move on to Fulham and Newcastle. Not a ton to write about here. Fulham just kicking themselves that they didn't actually win this game, because they gave Newcastle really the front end of it. Newcastle came in with a very limpid squad, and that really showed. The back line, featured like Emil Kraft, although Lewis Hall, who came in, well, he was a doubt to play, and he didn't necessarily look fit as well. Missing Livramento, missing Trippier, and Dan Burn has to play center back now for you. Missing Sven Botman, and then they got even more injuries. I think Willock had to go off, and they had to play Elliot Anderson to kind of finish the game out. Weren't really able to get their attackers going with Anthony Gordon and Ishtek. There's maybe one or two moments, but not enough. And then lo and behold, because Fulham had all this football and all these chances, and they weren't able to really make many of it count. You make it a 0-0 game going into the 84th minute. You allow for just one moment to happen to beat you, and it does, and it comes from a really really nice play by Bruno to even start the move. I think he threads in a very nice kind of through ball that splits 2 Fulham players, and then I think it's one time when Harvey Barnes is able to come on. He comes on as a sub, and he's influential as a sub again, just like we saw versus West Ham just last week, and he's able to get to the byline, and he has a nice little cutback cross, and I think it's defended, but the rebound falls to Bruno, and Bruno just smashes it in. And right before this, Newcastle or Fulham had a bit of a warning shot because Newcastle scored, I think, off a corner kick where Fabian Schär was scored, and it was just ruled out. But this was a very weird game because the possessions and shots was like, I mean, Fulham had like 15 corner kicks like throughout the whole game. Uh, I think Fulham had it was like 10 shots or 12 shots to like 0 or maybe 3 in the first half. The possession was 70% to 30. I think it actually improved a little bit in the second half, but it was maybe even 80% in the first half. Fulham deserved a little bit more out of this, and it was one of those where they weren't necessarily able to find Rodrigo Munoz a lot. It had to be really frustrating because they had so much control that Newcastle was sitting off, and they were like, "Okay, well, we're not gonna be able to press you because we've got very slow center backs. How are you gonna be able to play through us?" And just Fulham weren't able to do it, and had to be really really annoying for Marco Silva because he got the reaction he probably would have wanted because they were not competitive versus Nottingham Forest just a week ago, and Newcastle came off probably disappointed versus Everton. So in a weird way, maybe Eddie Howe got the opposite. But yeah, it was a very strange game. In the second half, it actually maybe looked like Newcastle did try to run at the ball, put a little pressure, a little bit. But really, the change of the game came from them having someone that was able to thread in that ball to break through a line, and it's fitting that he ends up getting the final goal for them in Bruno Guimaraes that Fulham were just kind of missing, and so that Tom Carney was played next to Paulinho, but and Carney was okay, but it just they missed that kind of quality. They weren't able to really get Muniz the ball much. I thought Anthony Robinson was quite influential for them. They were using his legs offensively. They were trying to get William the ball and trying to get maybe a numbers advantage to go their way there. Yeah, they played okay. It was just it didn't necessarily work out in their favor. And then with Newcastle, it's starting to get tight for the Europe that those final Europe spots. They aren't terrible away from West Ham, and it's funny because there's also there's a third table in the league. It's who's had the most disappointing season in the table, and it's like Chelsea, Newcastle, and Man United, all riddled with injuries. So that's kind of the main reason why. Uh, but Newcastle are close, kind of closely grouped with them again, and to be honest, when you don't, Eddie Howe has done what Ten Hag hasn't done. Eddie Howe has to play Dan Burn and Emil Kraft, and has to play a back line that can't do anything. So what has he done? He's changed how they played, and it's worked. So and credit to him. But another thing too is he does still have good players, and Bruno Guimaraes and Ishak and Gordon have been positive all season. But he also has Harvey Barnes to bring on finally as a bench. It's taken a while for him to actually recover from injury. It's really been unfortunate because he was brought in to kind of be a little something different, and I think he even scored in his debut versus Aston Villa in the first game of the season, and then he had to miss like 80% of the season. So you're finally having him back, and he's leading to he's leading to goals. I think he had an assist actually versus Everton as well, and then with Bruno Guimaraes. The note I had here is Brazil have some midfield three right now with Douglas Luiz, Paqueta, and Bruno Guimaraes, and just lovely ability to find space and squeeze clever balls on the ground to play through the lines and find teammates. And he really is a joy to watch. All three are a joy to watch. And the only negatives is just too many injuries. And they picked up another one with Willock. Not had Joe Linton all season basically. That's a kind of another key player that they've been missing. The only negative to say is, someone like a Longstaff probably needs to be replaced, next season if they're able to do it, because he's been a little rough. They had Lewis Miley for a lot of that season, and it looks like maybe he's picked up another injury as well. And they had to play on him every single game week. So it's just yeah, it's been a nightmare season for Eddie Howe, and there's been talks maybe he should be questioned a little bit. I thought he screwed up maybe in December about just playing everyone when maybe he should have done a little bit more rotation. I think he actually injured Trippier doing that. Uh, but he's turned things around in my opinion. I think he actually deserves a little bit more credit than what he's been given. And then with here, I mean, Fulham have to be kicking themselves, but because they did outright dominate, but it doesn't necessarily matter. And it's going to be an interesting summer also for Newcastle as well. What do they do with Eddie Howe? What are they? Are they going to be able to keep Bruno and Gordon and Ishak this summer? I think Ishak will have suitors because I mean so are the others as well. But Newcastle also need to reinvest in their back line. So I mean, Sporting's Diamande. There's a player on Lille. I think he's 18, Lenny Yoro, who is getting attention. I keep mentioning Tadibo for Man United, but he could possibly be someone for Newcastle to look at. But you're probably going to need to sell one of the other players to make that happen because they apparently have financial fair play issues, even though their owners are the richest in Europe. I don't really get how that works, but it almost seems like financial fair play is about punishing clubs without necessarily cachet, prestige, essentially, than necessarily punishing rich owners, which I don't necessarily think is fair. But that gets to a different story. And then we'll end with let's see, are we close to ending? We have Wolves and Fulham. I think this might be the last game where Wolves and West Ham, where West Ham do go on to win 2-1. A little unlucky. Wolves actually had a shot for a goal at the end where they scored and basically the goal was called off. Wolves have just absolutely no one for options. That they have Sarabia, who was able to score the PK, but really they get the PK from a really nice little run by Aitnori. He just runs the whole pitch. and is able to bring down. Aitnour is really the only like recognizable attacking player that Wolves have, and I think he even got hurt, towards the end of this. So we'll have to follow that. Mateus Cunha looked like he was on the bench, so that could be a positive if he's at least available. Wolves are going to have a say in the title race. They have to play all three teams still, and they've already beaten Man United. Man City. That's one of the few teams that has beaten Man City, but they basically did it with Pedro Neto, sprint, and they don't have Neto anymore. So we'll have to see how they're able to handle that. But that's another thing too. I mean, Gary O'Neill has done an amazing job with Wolves. I keep saying that, and then West Ham were able to. They didn't play their best game, but it doesn't really matter. They are able to win it, and they win it with James Ward-Prowse scoring from the corner kick. And I mean that. Like it's from his kick. Like he's able to curl it in from the corner flag. Just not what you would expect. James Ward-Prowse is good on free kicks, but not necessarily not you don't think of corner kicks as kind of a free kick. And what a goal that was. And then Mikata was able to get a PK. They get it from Emerson, and it works out for Emerson because Emerson was maybe the one responsible for bringing down Ait Nori. So a little redemption there at least. Mikata is able to finish the PK. And there you go. I mean, West Ham are just happy to get the points, and they now all they have is Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen waiting for them. So we'll see what kind of lineup they're able to run with. Uh, and that's kind of I think that's kind of it where we're at. Not a ton to really talk about. I do think it was probably unfortunate for the Kilman goal to not really count. But another thing too is I think Emerson had a goal early in the second half that probably should have stood too. So that those two kind of cancel out. I just think it's impressive that they're still competitive, considering the squad that they have. And with West Ham, yeah, I mean, no one really able to get involved in the game. So I mean, Wolves did a decent job, kind of just making things difficult. Uh, yeah, the front three was Sarabia, and it was like Tommy Doyle, and then it was I know Tommy Doyle is a Man City loanee player that most usually plays in midfield, kind of deeper, and Doyle has a terrific ball that maybe even plays in for the first goal. So or that plays in Aitnouri for the one of the runs. So every single game week, I keep kind of saying it. Like Wolves should not be competitive, and they have been. So credit to Gary O'Neill to keep them going, even though they don't really have a ton to play for. And with West Ham, they do have a lot to play for. They still have Europe to look at, and they still have a potential to end in a Europe spot for next season as well. So we might not be able to see Moyes do some shuffling rotation. He might have to lean on his guys, his starter guys, to play him through it. So we'll see how that all ends up, and then that's kind of it. So that's it for this week, and I'll try to be better next week at spending less time. I don't have a Arsenal, Man City, and massive Liverpool game to touch on this week. I think the main one will be Arsenal and Aston Villa. But so I'll be able to spend less time than necessarily doing that. I promise. I promise that'll be the last time. And so, thank you for tuning in. And until then, you stay squatty and stop recording.